Welcome to the last episode of It's Server Time. It's been a wild ride, it's been a journey, but all good things must come to an end. Yes, this is not the last of the year, this is the final episode of It's Server Time. You guys have all been a great audience, but I have to thank, as always, my co-hosts who have been with me for this entire journey. We have Mix here, we have Note, and we have Pernogo. Couldn't have done it without you guys, and I mean that.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it. It was pretty cool.
Mm. That's so sweet. That was such a touching note to start on.
Yeah, it was.
The crowd goes mild.
But,
But all right, maybe we'll get into the sentimental feelings later on in the episode. We have things to talk about as per usual for It's Server Time. We'll talk about why it's the last episode later too. So make sure you hear what's next for all of us. But we obviously just watched the year conclude. The finale was the Blast World Finals in Abu Dhabi. And there's a lot to talk about, but a team that actually really was struggling for some of this year was under major scrutiny. And I do mean major scrutiny. That was G2. They were able to come out with a trophy win. They added that to their cabinet. First time since 2017 that G2 were actually able to secure themselves a Tier 1 trophy. I think the last time was, the last tournament I know they won was like a 2019 Champions Cup or something like that. I don't even know what the 2017 one was, if I'm being completely honest.
DreamHack Malmo.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
DreamHack Malmo. But yeah, they actually got things together for themselves. So, what are you guys' opinions on G2? Did this look like a performance that makes you want to believe in this G2 roster?
I mean, on the server, sure, but I don't know if that's gonna stick going into the new year. Like, I feel like this is also the point of the year where like all the teams are kind of closing out the year. Yes, obviously titles are good, but even FaZe were just like, yeah, we had a good first half of the year, second year kind of shit, whatever. Like, go next. And I feel like there's less, like, yeah, they're big titles, but there's a little less motivation almost. So I think going into the new year, it's just going to be like, there's always like a shift after the break as to what teams stand at the top. And I think like, I don't necessarily see G2 like consistently contending for these kind of big titles, even though their performance here was pretty decent. I just don't know if that's going to be maintained. Like, you had JKS being like one of their best players for some of these maps as well. So if I don't know, maybe they've worked something out that they didn't before, but I don't know if that's going to remain.
For me, it just kind of, if there's one thing G2 can take away from it, right? Like being able to win this event, is that like you're not cursed, for not having won like an event for 5 years. You just kind of sucked, and you can still win events. So, I mean, it's a good event to win, but I would just take it as like, yeah, that was nice. Like, it's nice to have something go our way, but it's not something you can be like, oh, well, obviously, like, this lineup is completely figuring itself out, and like, we don't have anything to really think about for like going into the next year. There's still a lot they have to think about. There's still a lot they're gonna have to work on. I still have a lot of like doubts when it comes to like this lineup and this team, but it's a very feel good thing to end the year on. Even if, I mean, I don't think anyone would say that like this feels like one of the biggest like events or trophies to win of the year. That's just kind of naturally how it is when it's mid-December and the last event of the year. So, yeah, just like kind of a feel good thing to take away, but not something that I think they should like kind of rest their laurels on.
It's, to me, the G2 run really looks to me like obviously this event at the very end of the year had so many storylines with it. We had like, obviously, Liquid looked pretty promising, but didn't make it in the fall finals. And now they were able to make it all the way to the end. Obviously G2 themselves finally taking a top tier LAN victory. That was huge for them, especially in the wake of what happened in Hooksy's personal life with his father passing away. And then the fact that he's able to do it, and he goes and does all these emotional, heartfelt interviews where he said, I thought I wasn't good enough, I was doubting, all this other stuff. And then now here he is with the trophy, right? And NiKo, obviously, a player that should have won a lot more, it feels like. If you look at his career and his body of work, it's like, wow, okay, he finally won something. Like, I think he specifically, the last tournament he won was one of the events in the online era. It might have been an IEM New York or something that was online. So that's just stuff that's like, okay, where is this guy's trophies? And also m0NESY, for the fact that how good he is. You definitely thought this kid should have been more MVPs, more victories in general, right? More finals. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there was a storyline that even Scrawny picked up on in the cast was like, after they toppled FaZe in the semifinals here, they returned to where they ended the year at minimum top 2 finish in Katowice. And it's like, okay, that if you just looked at the beginning and end, you'd be like, oh, G2 was probably a pretty legit lineup. No, bro, there was such a radical drop off like in the middle. So that was crazy. But again, I don't know that it's consistent. We need to see way more of it. As Note said, a lot of teams maybe not doing too hot in terms of finishing the year strong. This is like a very heavy circuit where you have to play a lot out of the whole year. And I'm going to be honest, like this, maybe we'll get into this if we bother touching on the experience of watching this event, but it kind of felt like this event was a bit more of an afterthought compared to some of the other events that we saw. The crowd was obviously much more tepid. In general, it was just like a weird event to have, a weird location to have. And so there's a lot of things that built up to make this event feel not as epic as the previous Blast event for me. And so I think maybe the players also, that does rub off on them. You obviously saw the players' reactions to the crowd, the Brazilian crowd in Rio. It's like, holy shit, this is a completely different experience playing in this crowd, in this environment. And then you flash forward to the World Finals at the very end of the year, and it doesn't really feel like it earns the title of the tournament. So anyway, that's a lot of stuff. But I think there's not to put too many asterisks next to this run, G2 obviously beat FaZe, who was my team to take the whole event, especially after they made the finals of the previous Blast event. I thought for sure FaZe would be able to lock this in. You obviously saw FaZe dust them off on Ancient in the previous series that they played against G2. So I thought a lot was going into FaZe camp. G2 obviously make it in 2 very, very close matches. So I'm very pleased to see that they won it legitimately, and it wasn't maybe a run that you could say is more fluky. Maybe, they could have gotten a better opponent in the final or something, but that didn't end up happening. So yeah, I still think that G2 earned it, but I'm also not sure that they would repeat this if given another chance, and we'll see if they get another chance in the future.
I think they'll have other chances to make some deep runs, actually. I think that the skill on this team, it was almost, I think the reason that Hooksy in particular was under so much criticism is that when you have NiKo and Monacy already, you should think that your team should be competing for a top 5, top 6 slot, I'd say, in the current space. Like, you look at the teams that are sort of ranked in that kind of area, and I think that other than maybe a couple, there are some like beneath that. I mean, like it's hard to imagine that you wouldn't occupy a top 7 slot, because look at who's top 7 now. It's like Maus, and then like Furia is beneath that. If you have NiKo and Monacy, you definitely think you should be above those teams because you have 2 world-class players. But I think that what's really nice about what G2 did here is that I really just loved their T side so much, and It was kind of a glimpse of what we got, or it was kind of a harkening back to what we saw back at ESL Pro League in the group stage when they went flawless. Didn't lose a single map there, where we were able to see like the mid rounding was very strong. They had a lot of different great ideas, especially for openers. Like one thing that G2 did very well here is that, in my opinion, they had really good game plans, and they kind of just forced to throw those down the throats of their opponents. Where like the one that really stuck out to me the most was when they played Vitality, where they kept going at Apex, essentially. Like they kept trying to go ramp, or they kept trying to do outside smokes to lower, so Apex would have to rotate lower, and they almost never even contested A. Like the most they would do is they kind of fight door here and there, but everybody kind of does that, And I think that just understanding what your opponent's weak spots are is something that for some reason so many teams in the space don't do. Because I've heard in interviews people say things like, oh, everybody's good on the other team, so we don't make game plans to target people. It's like, why not?
Yeah.
Why would you not do that?
There's no way they're not like. There's no way everyone on the other team is like all on the same skill level. Like there's still people you can target.
Oh, we know the inverse is true, right? Like they avoid Simple back in the day when he was on CT side. Every time you see an AWP on that side of the map or whatever, even if it's not Simple behind it, people are like, all right, that's where their guy is. And now that ushered in this era of like Brokey, Simple, people, other oppers, like taking a shot, falling back to the other site on CT side. You had to be mobile, you had to be unexpected. Where is he going to be? And then that was like a whole meta shift that happened recently, just in the last year or so, where you saw this mobility and this unpredictability be a huge factor in what CT sides could be successful with the ops. So I definitely think that's just one of those like, don't expose our strats, bro, or what. I don't know. Maybe that's also there's something else going on there, but I don't know why players would say that when it's clearly not true.
I just think in general, this kind of applies to like just from my experience, like to a lot of IGLs. I think a lot of people kind of hesitate. They kind of like want to break away from like whatever it is like their game plan is, or like whatever they feel like the proper way to play CS is.
Okay.
And then there's other IGLs that I've really liked, like say like Vanity, for example, that I've been on a team with in the past, where like he'll just be like, bro, we're just gonna go B because I think this guy sucks. Or like, you know, you look at the scoreboard and their A anchor is like 2-14 or something. You're like, fuck it, dude. Like, let's just go A. Like, what is he gonna do?
Yeah.
And you obviously sometimes like it will work out, like I think a good amount of time, and obviously sometimes like the guy's like 2-14 and then he just fucking pops off for like a 4K and just insta headshots everyone, and that's just
And then he's got his confidence back, and then you don't want to go and feed the beast again. Yeah. The thing about focusing Apex in this example is such an obvious move for, like, even if he's a 10% better player or whatever, if I'm the coach or whatever, I'm still being like, yeah, that guy tilts really hard on camera every time he dies, so just keep killing him, please, and then the whole rest of the team crumbles. That would be ideal, because, you know.
Yeah, it's also kind of like, if you directly go into like where Zywoo is, right, and he kills 4 of you, you're like, well, why the fuck did we do that? Like, it's Zywoo, like, obviously he's gonna fucking kill 4 of us. Whereas, like, if you do the same thing and you target Apex and he kills 4 of you, you're like, well, fuck it. Like, I feel like that was the right play. He just fucking owned us that time, and so you can kind of live with yourself a bit more.
Right.
It also is like very telling that going into that series, Zywoo was like one of the highest rated people at the Blast World Finals, but then by the end of it, he had like in that series, in that BO3, he had a 1.00 rating. Like, they just did such a good job avoiding him, and on every map, like, Zywoo was not finding that many first kills. Like, he was very free. Like, I think actually in the whole series, Zywoo had 5 first kills. Like, over 3 maps for Zywoo to get 5 first kills shows that G2 did a great job at just negating his presence. And that's something, like, I think this is where, like, honestly, like, why I always just take Simple in the GOAT or like the number one debate, because like
the same thing,
Simple will never let this happen. Like, Simple just like he can miss. Sometimes he can actually just play badly, but he'll always get himself involved. And I think that sometimes Zywoo's movements at the beginning of rounds are almost too predictable. Like, G2 effectively game planned against Zywoo. You almost never hear Simple was effectively game planned against, because as soon as Simple recognizes someone's doing something different to try to make his life difficult or get him less involved, he just goes to the action. He'll find the action and he'll make sure that he has a presence on the map. And Zywoo, sometimes he kind of just falls by the wayside. Like, he just kind of is an average opper, and that's it's rare. It's rare to see it. But I mean, it can happen, and Hooksy was actually able to put together a plan to have a better rating than Zywoo. Hooksy in that series had a better rating than Zywoo did. Like, that's just, I mean, I think the game plan went pretty effing well in that case. Yeah. Other stuff, I guess, like, let's talk about the grand finals. So Liquid were able to make it there. We'll shift the conversation to Liquid also, but like, again, I think G2 just looked like a much better team. T-side Inferno, again, is like a position where I felt like they were able to just find so much mileage. There's so many things that G2 are able to do at the same time on the map. Like, I think what Hooksy did really well with Copenhagen Flames is he gave everybody like the perfect level of autonomy, and I think he's doing the same thing again now, or people are starting to find that system where like NiKo knows he's going to be pressuring Banana, but Hunter also, or like JKS also know they can kind of do something else on the map at the same time, as long as they're not too crazy about it. And so what's nice about what their defaults look like and what you would hope for with this kind of star power is that it actually, in a way, unlocks Hooksy to make really good mid-round. So, like, Hooksy's mid-rounding in this tournament to me was easily the best of any IGL. Like, I didn't see anybody in, like, 4-on-4, 5-on-4 situations just put the pieces together and put so much pressure on opponents. Like, when I watched back the demos, like, dude, they're throwing nades at 2 bomb sites at the same time. Yeah. Like that's crazy. That's just crazy. Like nobody's really doing that. And it doesn't even feel like a fake either. It's like, it looks like there's 2 site hits happening at the same time. And it's just like, it's one of those things where, like, NaVi did that in 2021. VP actually sometimes would do, VP/Outsiders would sometimes do that in 2021. But like, a lot of teams don't really do that. They're more like a singular, like, spearheaded approach to their T sides. And I think this is kind of the pinnacle of calling, because like when NaVi were able to do this so well, it felt unstoppable, because it could just, so many things could go right for you. Like, sure, everything could crumble at the same time, but like, if it's played to the highest level, it's very difficult to deal with, because it's not just one smoke can stop you. It has to be like 2 sides of the map have to calm together and put a defense together.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention if we're going to touch on the FaZe series at all, but they did the same thing on Inferno. They constantly pushed and pulled FaZe rotations by doing that exact thing. Like, they were taking Banana late and then execing with, like, 3 people, but then they'd already be running, like, the first 2 people would already be running back to A, and it was just, like, 2 bomb site hits at the exact same time. And in general, like, that's exactly what I saw when I was watching them as well, with the fact that they controlled rotations so well that Hooksy just had a beat on exactly how to play his pieces in these games. And I don't know, like, it seemed like there's a lot more independence coming in from the players too. In his interview after the final, he mentioned that at least on Mirage, the CT side went pretty well, but he couldn't actually, like, get a feel for the T side in the second half for a little bit, and essentially, like, NiKo took over calling for a little bit, and, like, probably like 4 rounds or something, and then Hooksy got his he's like, I got my group back after NiKo kind of took over and did all of that. So he's also, like, willing to relinquish control, which is, like, for that's just a general good sign, because I think, like, there's always been that battle between NiKo and other IGLs on his team. So, like, having that dynamic able to actually effectively play out and give him a chance to kind of, like, get back into the groove is also a good sign long term. I just don't know how, like, is that going to be something that's sustainable if they're going to keep going like that? Like, I think that tends to happen with a lot of teams where you do have, like, a secondary caller take over for some rounds. It's just not something that we've really seen with this G2 so far. So I'm wondering if that's going to be, like, a recurring, consistent thing that they can bounce off of.
I don't know, man. As soon as I hear that NiKo is the one taking over the secondary calling duties for those few rounds, I'm thinking, like, alarm bells are ringing. I'm thinking back to his whole, there was that content piece where he obviously did the Frankenstein IGL. I don't know how many people saw that. That was a good one, though. G2 did this content piece where they had Dr. Frankenstein as NiKo. NiKo was that. And then I forget the assistant, the one that's, like, obviously not very well, and but that was Kenny S. Igor, yeah, probably Igor. And then so Kenny S is Igor, and he's like, Master, there's a new IGL we must create or whatever. And so that was great, brilliant, love stuff. And then of course NiKo sits up as himself in the Dr. Frankenstein. He's like, oh no, we must start over again because this is bad. But no, like, seriously, NiKo has this history of doing this, right? And maybe some people say now he's reformed NiKo, he's better, he's not going to do the same thing. I don't know, man. Even if I'm NiKo and my IGL is somebody who already has this crisis of confidence historically, and then is like, NiKo, I can't call, can you do this? It's like, I don't know, man. Like, that's already, there's some warning signs there. So I actually don't know if I agree that it's a good sign long term. It's a good sign if NiKo doesn't take it as an invitation to do more, or a signal that Hooksy's not capable, right? Because the one thing that I need from a guy who needs to prove himself is to think that he actually can prove himself. And up until this point, it felt like Hooksy could not do that, right? So, obviously the storyline and the timing, I mean, obviously a very tragic moment in his life, but he took it and he made hay while the sun shines, so to speak, and was able to strike while the iron is hot. There you go. There's another adage. And so you get this feeling that, oh, this is the only way it, like, not the only way it could have happened, but if it had to happen, this is the perfect time for it. And that's what makes this event run from G2 feel so effervescent or whatever. It's like, okay, it was here and then it was gone, and I don't know if we're going to get it again. In the FaZe series specifically, one of the things I noticed a lot is that after the Hooksy call would happen, obviously Kerrigan, we would say, a master of mid-rounding and of adapting mid-game, and I think Kerrigan did actually find good reads to counter. It's just that when that was in, he put the G2 players in those impossible situations. We saw the JKS 1v3 on round 29. We saw all of these clutch moments on various, across the 2 maps that they played in that series. It's like, yeah, okay, now it's FaZe on the receiving end of the treatment they were giving to everybody else, where the Kerrigan call, maybe it was the right call, and the initial play execution was whiffed by the players, and then somebody else dug deep and pulled them out of that situation.
I don't know, but they looked super panicked in some of those rounds,
yeah.
Man. Like, FaZe looked really panicked. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was, like, sure, maybe some of the calling was fine, but, like, the players actually looked panicked in some of the executes that G2 were doing, or even just some of the map control plays they were doing. You could see it when they were, like, taking rap on like art side on Inferno. There was, like, these weird, like, Brokey looked like he was literally scrambling. Twist looked like he was scrambling. It was like you say that it looked like rotations were well controlled, but like it looked
No,
extremely.
I said
like,
the responses
uncharacteristic.
to the Hooksy calls late into the game on the CT side specifically. When I'm thinking of Nuke, I'm thinking of the
I
times
think the
where
responses looked panicked. That's what I mean though. Like they looked like they weren't like comfortable with what they were doing.
I think even
in some of these
when they
scenarios.
are comfortable, they look uncomfortable. When you go back to their runs and like you think of the Antwerp Major, like you think of
Yeah.
like some of these miraculous moments or whatever, and maybe the call got them there as a negative thing. Maybe again it was the I've seen this with MSL so many times where he's got the right call, but it's not the right call for his players because his players can't do that or they don't do that in that time, and it's like okay, we got to do that call again, but this time you actually got to hit the guy or something, and so sometimes it's that, sometimes it is actually the calling, but in either case, FaZe would get an advantage, and then G2 would somehow carve it back in a way that they had no business, like as rounds that they had no business winning. And that's normally what we attribute to FaZe, which is another reason why this G2 run just seems like, unless they're going to do that all the time, which admittedly would be living up to the billing of some of these players, like JKS, like Mauisnake, like NiKo. Like, yeah, these are players who should be able to win you completely insane, impossible rounds, but they haven't done it until this event consistently, right? And they did this in this event consistently. And that's what I think is like, okay, if we can see this all the time, then this could be a great harbinger of things to come. If this is a one-off, then congrats on the trophy, but back to the drawing board, and we'll find that out probably soon in Katowice, right? So I'm excited to see where that goes, but it's just another point that I thought of is like, you can adapt to this, right? Once you know about it, once you feel it. And I think once that adaptation comes in, I don't know how often you're going to be able to rely on those round 29 on Nuke, JKS 1v3 clutches. That, I mean, great player, obviously, or good player, we'll say, more recently. Obviously shot up to great in this event specifically. Hopefully he can hold that for G2 fans.
I will say when I said it was a good sign, by the way, I meant specifically that like NiKo can take over for a couple of rounds until Hooksy gets back into control. Like I don't think it's a good sign necessarily that he would take control long term, but that's not what I saw in that specific example.
I mean, the back and forth between Hooksy and the rest of the team does seem like he has a pretty good level of control, actually.
Yeah,
like I don't think it's. Yeah, it doesn't feel like NiKo's nipping at his heels or anything as much. From at least like the cams that we're seeing and like what people are saying in interviews, like they're so they praise Hooksy so much every single time they get a chance to that it also is like I don't think anybody has any confusion about where the calls are coming from, which is nice. It kind of makes me curious of like, did they try this before? Did they want this? Because like I thought Alexi would have probably been pretty good at doing that, but I guess they just didn't like his calls in general. So either way, it's working for them.
Well,
but
maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe it was Xtaz the whole way through, and then Xtaz left, and now we're like, wait, did we even need to go through the Hooksy saga? I don't know, but whatever. French Counter-Strike.
Let's talk about Liquid. Let's talk about Liquid. This is their second grand final of the year. I'd say that their run was pretty competitive, but like it also like left something to be desired. Like if they were on the other side of the bracket, I think it would have been pretty difficult for Liquid to get a grand finals run, for example. Like if they had to play Vitality, if they had to play FaZe earlier, I'm not sure if they would have necessarily won those. But do you guys think that this Liquid second place, like where do you think actually like rank them at this tournament? That's how I want to put it. Like rank, do you think they were the second best team, or do you think another team just had a worse draw than them?
I don't think they were the second best team. I think it would probably go G2, FaZe, and then I'm really not sure who to put third, but it isn't Liquid.
I think it has to be Vitality or Liquid, I think, right?
Yeah, I would put them probably third, to be honest. I think Vitality looked pretty decent here as well. It's kind of hard. It's like quite the toss-up for 3 to 4th between the two.
Yeah,
but I'm thinking like at that point it gets to the head-to-head. Who do you take over the other team? Do you take Liquid to beat Vitality? And that's the question. And I'm not sure that I do, and that's why it's a 3rd or 4th, right?
If Vitality hadn't lost 2-0 to OG, I probably would have said Vitality, but
sure, yeah.
I don't know, because of that. I'm still because they still made the finals. I would still put Liquid as the third best team here. But kind of like I think honestly what you said earlier about them, like they just leave like something to be desired still. That's kind of just how I feel about Liquid overall. They just kind of seem stuck at like tier 1.5. Well, I mean they're still tier 1 team obviously, but like they don't seem capable of like winning an event actually at the moment. It seems like they're still just like missing something. That's not necessarily like just like Nitro's fragging or anything. That's like honestly, I feel like the biggest thing they're still missing is like big performances from OC, from their opper, like more consistently, like having games where OC is like stepping up and being kind of like the hard carry of the team. He's not like playing like terribly most of the time, but I would say he's probably not having like enough impact for Liquid to be a top team yet.
Didn't Nitro end as like the highest or highest rated IGL of the tournament or something too?
Yeah, he had a good tournament.
Yeah, as a player.
Yeah.
Let me see. Well, I mean, I think the OC point is really something that needs to be addressed because I think that all of us were fans of OC coming into this lineup, and I think that if you wanted an American opper, this is your best option. Like, there's no one else that's any close to being as good as OC, but it's still like on the world stage. I think he was. I mean, the only opper that was worse rated than him at this event was Cadian, and I actually think that like, if you could manage for OC to be like as good as Cadian was for the major or like the fall finals, then you're cooking if you're Liquid. But like, I haven't really seen anything that leans me to believe that that's going to be coming out anytime soon from OC. Unfortunately, I feel like he's kind of like to me right now, OC is probably the most definitive support opper in the top scene right now. Like, they don't really set him up a ton, but when he does go for his opening picks, he kind of hits them with like, I'd say like medium success rate, not like the Monacy simple, like no, like I would say like the top 5 opper success rate at just hitting shots. Like, I actually think like OC's biggest flaw is that he actually just doesn't always nail the shots now, because I think he's like, you don't want to change the system too much with Liquid. If you're making grand finals appearances a couple times this year, if you're a team that's pretty secure in their, I'd say top 5 in the world spot, top 6 maybe, if you want to be a little harsher on them, top 6 in the world spot, you don't really want to change to set up OC, because then you're probably taking something away from Yakindar or Elige for them to do well. And I like the system right now for Liquid. So it's almost just like you purely need OC to be better mechanically if you want to put it all onto one thing, which is, it's harsh, but it is. I think that's the biggest downfall right now for them.
Yeah. The biggest problem with like trying to say, oh, we need a different opper than OC for me is that like, who would you get even if you decided to import? Like, if you imported Dexter before he joined OG, if you imported, I don't know, like Sun Pius before he joined ENCE, like, these players, okay, maybe they are superior to OC in a 1-to-1 matchup, but the fact is that we know as NA fans, as fans of Counter-Strike, we know that NA teams are very particular about the emotional sort of surroundings and like the ambiance and the mise-en-scene of how the team works. And so if you were to take out OC, who's a personality that seems like Liquid really jive with, and you were to replace him with Dexter, knowing what we know about him from both what's behind the scenes and what's come out. Also, if you replaced him with Sun Pius, who I don't know much about in terms of his personality, but he seemed, according to Snappy, he said that before, this guy wants to talk all the time, or he wants to like, bring stuff to the table all the time. I don't know how well that would be received, right? I don't know how, I mean, obviously Yakinder seems to be providing a lot of input and that's received well, but we can't know that it would just be a 1-for-1 slot in. And so if you are just going to say, okay, let's keep this roster, as Mauisnake said, they're making top, they're in the top 6 at least. They're making these grand final appearances. What needs to change without changing players? Yeah, I actually don't know what you can do other than tell OC to hit aim lab more or whatever, which isn't really that useful advice because these players are cracking crazy.
I think in general, the first thing that Mauisnake said is actually exactly what they need, which is that OC just can't be missing some of these pivotal shots. Like, there's a lot of times where like he does lock down areas sometimes, but there is a lot of whiffs where like even one kill would have made a massive difference in changing the timing of like a ball. Even if he dies, like if he gets one there, it changes the entire like outcome of how much control the other team has. It's just like there's some really, really pivotal shots that he missed when I was watching some of these games that it's just, if they want to have a top, like if they want to be a title contender, that just can't happen. It sounds like really easy to be like, just hit your shots, but it's like, for once, that is actually a valid NA excuse to losing the match. Like,
yeah.
The thing is that like, if you want to find like, just finding an opper that's gonna like hit like all their fucking shots, just doing whatever, like, being able to play like that passive style all the time, is A, like fucking difficult to do just because it's just hard to find operas like that are just that consistent. So with Liquid, it's like, to me, it's kind of like a case of like, is it A, OC not doing enough to make himself comfortable? Is Liquid, like the system itself, not doing enough to kind of give OC a bit more room to work with? Because he definitely can like kind of fall back into this like kind of like support opping, kind of like how he was when I initially like joined like ATK and like that when he first like joined like JT and them, where he had like an 8% like opening kills rate. He was literally like solely a support opper, didn't really do much, and then he kind of had to like grow himself into that role in the team of going for like a ton of opening picks, making like a ton of space for himself. So I don't even know if it's like all just like the system, like Liquid system, just like doesn't have enough room. And like obviously, yeah, you could say, well, if they give OC more room, they're taking away more room. But I almost wonder if that might even just be better at this point, because I don't know. I feel like having your opera, like having room to work with, is really important in a team for like consistently having space across the map and just having like presence on the map compared to, you know, however much space you want to have for your 3-star riflers, which you do have like 3 insane riflers in Elysian, NAPH, and Yekindar, and you obviously want them to have space to work, but obviously you still need the opera to have more impact. So you need to figure out like how to do that, if OC can do that, if you can make that work, or like is OC just not going to be like a good long-term fit for the team?
I don't know, man. I do have one thing to say.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to say, which is FaZe Clan were the best team of the whole year with a very unconventional op style. Liquid, obviously, like that's completely different play styles between Brokey and OC. I'm not saying that they're comparable in that sense, but it's like you can innovate or do something specific to your style and your team composition that will allow you to succeed and get to the heights of the game. If you decide that you don't want to do it the conventional route, and maybe OC's skill set isn't suited to that conventional route or whatever. So, but that requires this sort of like, okay, for one, you have to be like, okay, I'm not as good as I'm not the device style opper or whatever, but I can be a different style of opper. I can make my own style or something. You have to have that within you, which is what Brokey seems to have. And then you also have to have buy-in with the team to sort of build a setup around that. And it feels like Liquid haven't really, I don't know if they've observed whether or not that's actually true about OC, that he needs to have his own sort of style and he needs to have his own space or whatever. It doesn't seem like they've carved out a space for him to succeed, but they also don't necessarily want to go anywhere. I'm not even sure if they can set up like oppers in the same way. I mean, this is a team where many of the members of the team have had no opper for a long time, no definitive, like, you know, opper. It was Nitro for a while on the Grand Slam Liquid, but even then it was like, I mean, that's not his main role, right? And he's also the IGL, so it's like, I'm sure there's all sorts of permutations that were very different if you're trying to contrast that with the more standard opera. I don't know. This team just feels like even Yakinder had Jame as his opera, and okay, Jame is a good opera, but it's a very different style for a lot of people than most operas, right? So it's just like, it's so different. All of these players are not necessarily experienced with a like bog standard opera. And I don't know if they have the ability to set that up, or like that has to be a learned behavior, you know?
Well, actually, something I would point out is that so Nitro really hasn't had an opera aside from OC, like even like his Valorant teams, right? Because that was like kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
because it's Valorant.
Drawing to the Valorant XP. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, but
that's fine.
But I'm just saying he didn't have an opera as team, and then obviously you go back to Grand Slam Liquid and was Nitro opping the IGL, and you go back to who Elysian NAPH played with last year, which was Fallen opping as the IGL.
Okay,
and then you have fucking Yekindar, who's obviously playing with Jame as the ops, who was also the caller. So it's like all these people have been playing with oppers who were like the IGLs as well. So they had that innate agency to like set up the game for themselves and to like kind of like call around like whatever they want to do. And so now they're playing with an opper who's not the IGL, who's even like the youngest player in the team actually, who maybe is like, doesn't want to come in and say it to like Elige, NAPH, and Yekindar, like, this is what I'm gonna fucking do, and I don't give a shit. Like,
well, even Nitro too, the Grand Slam guy. You know what I mean? It's like all of these players are more experienced than me, but I have one of the most important roles, if not the most important role on the team. So what do I do with that? Like caught between two worlds, So that's a rough
And then
spot.
obviously his teammates are caught between like having played with these IGL oppers for the past 3 years, and now they gotta like have a young guy that's like gotta kind of find his voice and set up his team. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things that's fucking, maybe they'll figure it out. I don't know. I'm kind of like not convinced that they will, to be honest, but it would be nice to see OC posting like a 1.15 consistently and Liquid just fucking winning events. So hopefully that's what happens.
Yeah, anything else? I think, well, I guess something else that I would bring up though, is that I think we kind of saw a pretty good showing from from Elige at this. I think people were kind of drawing into question how good Elige could be, in big games, or I don't know. Like it kind of like felt like he sort of tapered off at one point this year, and I think he sort of reminded everybody how strong of a player he could be. Beyond that, for Liquid, I think like for their map pool, actually, this is something I would want to shift into. Is kind of like Anubis talk in general for this event. Like, because this was the first big event where we were able to see Anubis, I feel like we actually got a pretty good showing of a couple different ideas and styles. I think actually I liked, not sure whose T side I liked the most. I think I might have liked, was it G2's T side the most, or Liquid's T side? I liked both of theirs. And then I liked FaZe's defense the best. I don't know what you guys caught from these games, or any just general Anubis analysis that you guys want to bring to the table.
I'd agree. I really liked watching Liquid's T side on the map in general, but I'd say the map as a whole is so refreshing to watch. Man, it was so good. Like every time Anubis was in a veto, I was like, "Fuck yes, I'm making as much time to watch this map as possible." Just because it was just genuinely like, I don't know. When I see a veto and I see like Vertigo or Ancient or even Dust 2, I'm just like, fuck it. Like maybe I'll catch a few rounds of the map if I'm not covering it or whatever, or I'll watch the VOD and skip through some rounds. But genuinely, just every time Anubis was on, I was like, oh, this is like very enjoyable to watch. Like even the way the teams play it, it's always like, I feel like there's always like some form of action happening at some point. Like whether, even if there's not necessarily like a kill incoming, like just the way that teams are forced to like take fights and take certain bits of control, like there's always something happening and it makes it genuinely interesting to watch. Ancient, you might have like people take like outside like lower like the B control area, and then they'll sit there for like 40-50 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, cool, this is really sick. Yeah, I love watching this. Or you'll have people like lurk into red room and then sit there for 30-40 seconds. I'm like, this is just okay, cool, I guess.
I think one thing that does suck about small maps like Ancient and Vertigo, like I think they are like the two smallest maps, right?
In terms of actual distance that you travel, because like obviously Vertigo has double like floor space or whatever, so it's like squared or what, but it's still like, okay, I go here and then my footsteps are heard or whatever, you know what I mean? So.
Well, one thing that I would bring up about a map like Ancient is that because you actually kind of get space so quickly, like you can kind of just slow the game down, and that's why I think the games are really not exciting for us as viewers, because they do just take lane or they take cave, and honestly the optimal play is just play to punish for the next like 30 seconds. If the CTs make an aggro play, like how many times this year have you seen the Ts get that B lane control and then the CTs just push down B ramp and just die? Like it happens so much, and I think so many people are like, why would they push? Like that's obviously the Twitch comment is like, why push ? But it's literally like because they want to have some control, they want to have some ideas of what's happening, but then the Ts are just playing to punish because they're playing optimally too. And so it just leads to like very boring interactions, whereas Anubis there was a lot more in terms of just like people kind of like fighting for different amounts of space. I think like the space that I actually think mid was a bit better. It played a little bit better than I thought it would. But what I thought was less interesting was actually the A side of the map. I think A's kind of fight towards that like curve area, like and then kind of into the opening of the canals. I think that kind of led to like less interesting interaction, because I almost just felt like it's like it almost kind of felt like pushing like B tunnels on Dust 2, but you are rewarded so much more heavily as a CT. Like you like push that, and then you can see them you can see the T's trying to get into cave to get into B now, like through the whole of canals, and it's kind of like I feel like that's so strong. Like I feel like if you push that, I almost feel like the sightline should be blocked one more, because Rops was just pushing that over like a few times over and over again, and I was actually thinking to myself, why isn't Spinks playing here for Vitality if Rops is doing this for FaZe? Because Spinks is a guy that just wants to push all the time. Yeah. And already playing in A sucks ass. Like if you get exec on, you are going to die. So I would put someone that's like very aggro, like Spinks there, and I would just say, yep, just if you feel like pushing, just go. Like you're not going to hold the bomb site anyways. We don't want you to die, obviously, for nothing. But if you have an inclination that they're going towards mid or they're going towards B, just go, because the value we get out of your push is like it's very hard to combat that for T's.
What I'll say about go ahead.
No, sorry, I was gonna say, because it's not really related to this, but it's so funny how like just like this whole like fucking like interesting like game plans, like, you know, pushing versus pulling, and, you know, all this interesting stuff going on, and then Twitch chat would just be like, "Why push?" question mark.
Yeah,
and that's just like a fucking idiot that has no idea what he's doing.
It's the most silver comment ever. Like it's
it's only going to get worse, guys. Like the ancient changes that recently happened to push CT spawns further back, it's going to get worse now, because the whole problem with ancient is that you don't have enough forward positions. Like think about overpass, or think about like Mirage, where CTs there's like a line of scrimmage that you can go to, and you're like, okay, I will take a fight here or go for info, and then I will fall back into the bomb site or some other piece of cover, and then I can either play on the bomb site or I can go back even further to play for retake. And it's like this multi-layered approach to, like, you know, map control, and like you got to fight for what you got and to keep control of that. And then there's too many things to get control of the entire way through, so you have to pick and choose based on what your default is as CT side and also what your read is on the MT. It's this very rich sort of decision tree. But on Ancient, it's just fuck, there's no spot anywhere, so I'm just going to sit right here at the front of the game, and then I'm just going to wait for T's to run into me, or I'm going to think, oh, well, maybe I should push, and then I have to fall back. So I can either push forward or fall back once, and then that's it. There's no multi-layered. There's nothing else you can do on Ancient. So now you can't even get to the point where you can realistically push until like super way late into the mid round, which is going to encourage T's to do this thing again even more. Now they're going to play to punish. Now the CTs don't get there as fast or whatever. It's like Valve doesn't understand what is wrong with the map. So then they're just like, what if we make it worse by thinking we're making it better? I don't know, man. Do they have mappers on the team over there? Like what is going on?
Just remove it. Just bring back Train, an actual good map.
Yeah.
And we can all be happy. And then remove Vertigo too.
Yep.
And replace it with literally anything else. I don't care what it is.
Yeah, seriously.
The original Dust, like literally, would be better than this shit. Please.
I don't know if I can co-sign that, but I can co-sign a lot of maps actually. Like Tuscan or something.
You can tell me that like watching pro teams on Dust 1 would not be more interesting than Vertigo.
I think the meta of that map is actually really bad, though.
Yeah.
Like Dust 1's meta is literally just like
so maybe the novelty will wear off after a month, but then we can find something else.
Dude, I think that map is so dumb CT sided for Dust 1, because it's like there's only 2 breach spots per bomb site, and there's infinite places to play as a CT. Like you could play forward, you could play back. It's a bad map, admittedly. But honestly, if it were Vertigo for Dust 2, I would think my life would be better. Actually, I'll just say that. I think my life would be better for the most part.
Vertigo, definitely.
Yeah, Dust 2 is fine with me.
But like the same Dust 2 or Dust 2 with changes?
Even the same Dust 2. If they literally did, even if it were literally that Dust 2 for Vertigo, I would have been fine with that. I mean,
well, it was basically if Vertigo went out and Anubis came in, that would have been the best change, you know?
Yes.
Followed by Ancient being replaced by something else, like Train.
The CSGO guy on the Twitter or whatever he actually asked me which one would you take out for it, and I did say Vertigo for my own pleasure, but actually, like, you know, Dust or Overpass for like if you want to keep things fresh.
Overpass? What?
No,
I like Overpass a lot.
Overpass is only bad.
You are the problem.
Overpass is only considered bad, I should say, because of the CT meta. Now that the A1S is in the dumpster, you know.
I think Overpass is actually a better map now.
Yeah.
How many times do we see it at this tournament? Like a couple? Like
yeah, we didn't see it too often. Yeah. Inferno got slightly better as well because there's less smoke spams, but I'm like the only person, like Thorin's the only person who thinks that new Nuke is terrible. I'm like the only person that thinks Inferno is terrible.
Overpass has only played twice. Vertigo's played once.
Yep, Vertigo's only played once. Vertigo's only played.
Oh yeah, that was the other point I was going to make, is that Anubis came in and everybody's like, "Holy shit, Anubis!" And it's actually a good map right out the gate in pro play. I can't wait to watch more tier 1 games of this. And then the one time Vertigo was there, I was just like, "Fucking close the stream, bro. I'm not watching this." So it actually it made it worse to watch a terrible map because I just watched a new and exciting and fresh map, and I don't want to watch Vertigo. So bye. Yeah. So that was
I'm gonna say this is my boldest take, I think, right now, is that I actually think Mirage to me is just the best map again. I think plays so well. I think there's always like such a great story being told by every match that unfolds on it. I rarely see a game that just is like, this feels stale to me, because I always just see so many different ideas being thrown out from especially the offense, where it's like there's so many good ways that you could like outthink your opponent, and like the mid rounding on it is, oh dude, once you get mid control, dude, it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful to watch conversions towards bomb sites with it.
See, I love the game of like doing like your mid control, but also you need like good ways to like fake your mid control, because there's so many teams even still where like I can instantly tell if they're mid or not just based on how they flash, because like they'll when they actually take mid, they're like super set up. It's like, you know, flashes like over mid and they're kind of like popping at the same time, and then they want to fake it and it's just like one dude going over there and he's just like tossing a flash over the roof, 3 seconds, toss another flash over the roof, and it's just, I don't know, I always try to like train my players to like listen to these things just to easily know.
I mean, that's what like Gnosis and stuff are so good, and Starcaller for Leadifier. Like, this is just any tool right now that's just basically like flash tendencies. They seem so valuable, but like I don't know, I don't know. I think you've experienced this too, Mix, where it's like sometimes players just don't want to always like try to memorize the sound of a nade or some shit, because like, they might think I'm wrong, and then they make a bad play because of it, and then they blame that or some shit.
I mean,
like,
it's just like, you don't even have to do that. Like, if you hear 3 flashes pop in mid within like 3 seconds, like there's a difference between hearing like
there is
2 flashes over 6 seconds or something.
For me, it was always
you don't have to be like, oh, this 100% means that nobody is in mid. But like, you know, it's a general tendency. Like, there's like a lot of information you can glean off that.
I just have to explain it to players that like, just because like, you know, like just because we know they're in mid or we know they're not in mid doesn't mean you have to fucking do like a specific play off of that.
Exactly.
Like, if you know they're in mid and you still feel like you want to flash out and just fucking fight them in mid, I don't really care. Like, you can do whatever fucking play you think is the best, but like just having the info of like what they're doing, like the general trend, is always just going to be beneficial for you. It doesn't mean you're going to win every single round because of it or anything. It's just increases the odds of winning a round, which is just a good thing.
Just knowledge. It's just info that can help you influence your next decision more accurate, and make a more accurate choice.
It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Just saying.
No. Okay. Anything else you guys want to say about the World Finals? You guys want to get into like year recap stuff? How about this? Any disappointments from the World Finals that you guys want to touch on? Anyone that like, because I think the general one is FaZe, but like we kind of already touched that with the G2 FaZe series, and it was kind of a commendable loss for FaZe.
Yeah, I don't even know if I mean, it's a disappointment they didn't end the year in the same place they started it, but you know, G2 earned that victory. It didn't feel like it was like, FaZe just capitulated or whatever. So I thought that was good. Obviously, Vitality still not a top team. I mean, a top team because there's only so many teams, but you know what I mean? Like, they're still not a top 3 team in the world. Still not going to contend for titles with this lineup, it seems like. So that's disappointing, because I mean, when they first made the changes before Spinks was even brought in, and they went international for the first time, it's like, bro, where's the the time? Well, give them time. They're learning English. They're calming in different languages now, and it's like, okay, well, we'll give them time, and maybe they'll be powered up for the majors and stuff. But then they don't really show up there either. So it's disappointing that it's come to the end of the year and they still haven't really shown us much. Obviously, they won a single title, but you know, it wasn't one of the important ones. It wasn't a stage match. It wasn't an arena match, so a lot of asterisks, or a lot of just like, why is it only one tournament with this amount of money and this amount of players?
How about like Outsiders? Like, I think that was a team that I think most people probably at least would have put them like top 4, or at least make playoffs. Like, I don't think that was much of a stretch. But you look at the teams they lost to, and actually it's number 1 and number 2. So it actually kind of softens the blow a little bit to still have some hope for the future for Outsiders. Like, if they played like an OG, dude, they would have definitely, like, I think they definitely would have won. Or if they played Vitality, I think they could have won that, actually. I think there's a couple teams here. And obviously if they played a Heroic that weren't quite themselves with... I'm not going to read too much into the Heroic games, but I'm also going to say I think that our Outsiders could have beat them. Like, even though Outsiders came in last, I think they easily could have been like the 4th best team here, or 4th or 5th.
They could have made playoffs.
Easily better. Yeah, easily better if they had a better group draw.
What's disappointing about the Outsiders loss and them crashing out is that it's going to make people think that the IAM Rio Major was even more of a ridiculous fluke than it was. Like, they're just like, Heroic makes the run look way more, like good for Outsiders because Heroic won the last big event before this. It's like, oh, okay, Heroic are a legit team and they did it against FaZe. Isn't that great? Outsiders are really also a legit team because they won against Heroic. It's sort of like that retroactive applied. Now it's like, okay, maybe not. Maybe Outsiders just fluked it, which is kind of sad, especially when you realize that they lost to the teams that made it to the grand final, right? So it's like, maybe just format or maybe just unlucky or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. We still need to see more from this team. Also, when you win a major, people are going to be downloading your demos. Like, they're going to know how to play against you. So players aren't going to, or casual fans aren't going to realize that part. But that makes it a lot harder to succeed in the very next tournament, especially since you just won the major, bro. Like, maybe you might go right back into a boot camp, as we heard from James Banks, but like, nah, bro. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. There's going to be something where you're going to cool off mentally.
They did go into their opening series with the whole thing being like, fuck it, we're picking Anubis in our first pick. So, like, you know what? Respect.
Yeah. Massive respect to that. Massive respect.
That's true. Yeah. And then they didn't do that well.
No, they didn't.
It was actually, I watched that game pretty closely because it was the first Anubis game and I really wanted to see how it played out. I thought that their CT side was kind of just too passive. Now that I know everything I know about Anubis, I think that playing back on Anubis is bad. Like, because there's so much value, like I was talking about earlier, from pushing out A or even just contesting out long B a little bit more. Like, long B is a little bit weird because there's almost like too many spots the T's can be. They can be on the high ground behind that shit up there. They can be on the low ground. They can kind of swing from the left side. Like, there's all these spots.
Love my established Anubis callouts.
Yeah,
that shit over there.
Sorry. Yeah, that shit over there. That thing over there. Like
that fucking that
doohickey. Yeah, like close left, close right. Like, there's just too many spots to push out long B, so you're not going to always favor that sort of engagement. But I think that you kind of need to, and I think you need to just like put pressure on the T's a lot more than what Outsiders did, because when I was watching Liquid play that T side, I was like, holy shit, their map control procedures are so well thought out and they're so good and clean. But then I also realized like nobody was actually contesting them for that space to begin with, and Outsiders were very much like, let's just keep turtling into the point where we can get exec on. And I think that's when I had my observation was just that if you're getting B split from the cave and from long, you are just screwed. Like, your angles are gone. Like, all the angles you want to play, like on this, any interesting angle is just like completely gone, and you have to basically play what Scrawny was calling glyphs. Like, you have to play that spot very like too frequently, and then it's just not even that good of a spot. Like, if we're being honest, like, it's just okay. So I think that you just like. It was good to learn about that, but I think that Outsiders probably are like, unfortunately, just not like, I don't know, like, everything just went perfectly for them at the major, and you still want to consider them a top 6 team, but like, I almost am like 6th, like I'm almost like 5th or 6th. I'm not actually saying they're in the top 3 for sure.
I was gonna say I actually liked Liquid CT side quite a bit as well on Anubis, just because I think fits their players really well. Like, the way Yakinder is already kind of set up as it is for aggressive plays, but also like it really fits Alicia's kind of like re-aggress sometimes, like catch the right timing, flash into certain spots. Like just the way they were playing it seemed like they had a good beat on how it should be played early on. I think a lot of teams are probably going to catch on over time, but like, they just had a far better game plan in a lot of these matches, I felt like. Just on the event as a whole, the one thing that did suck was the time zones. For, I think, everybody. For Europe and North America in general. Because, like, these matches were starting... I think they were starting at 10 p.m. for me, because I'm Pacific time. But, like, they were starting at 1 a.m. Eastern for a bunch of people. And, like, the grand final was at 2 a.m.
Yeah, the grand finals was... Oh, the timing of that was brutal. I mean, for me, it was midnight, but I actually go to bed pretty early. So I was like, oh, God, like, why?
I woke up to all the results before I actually... For most of them.
I think I caught a couple games live when it was starting a little bit earlier, but for the most part, I was just watching the YouTube streams back, which is why my tweets would come out like hours after the games ended always. Like, I would just write down my observations from those. Okay, then let's I think that's it. That's a good wrap for the World Finals. Pretty interesting event overall. I think what's even though like, there were those extenuating circumstances like the time zone and the kind of audience or whatever, I think honestly it was like, just generally speaking, well carried out. Like I guess there were a few tech pauses. Wait a second, I'm not even thinking about tech pauses because literally I watched almost every game on YouTube, so
Yep.
I just skipped the pauses. So I actually can't even
Yeah.
comment on that. I actually just they didn't even matter to me. So okay, well then moving on. Let's just start getting into this. So what we want to do now is a year recap, and we're gonna bring up some of our bests, and I kind of want to talk about a little bit about like runners up for some of these categories too, because I think actually a lot of these categories were almost too obvious. So like let's talk about who could be the number 2 in these spots. But we'll still obviously get into who we are crowning the champions of some of these results. So first things first, we're going to talk about the best IGL of the year. So I almost think this is going to be unanimous. Is there a hipster pick here? No.
Obviously, it's Shame because he saves the world or something.
He has the best stats. He has the best stats, actually.
My like for fun pick would have definitely been Jame.
Yeah.
Well, we could do runners up, but let's
Yeah.
just clear the air that it's Kerrigan, right?
Yes.
Let's clear the air. Kerrigan's the best IGL of the year. The championships, like what I call the Triple Crown, winning the opening major, the Katowice and Cologne, like that's 3 of the 4 what I would call the premier events of the year.
Yeah.
The World Finals, I think you kind of want to throw in there, but whatever. Like
They definitely weren't flawless the entire year, but I don't know how you could argue against winning a major, Cologne and Katowice all in the same year. So.
Yeah. I think there could have been room for like era discussions if they were able to win either or any of the following. If they won the second major, if they won the fall finals or the world finals, I think we could have started like saying, is the FaZe era here or like what's going on? Or is it the best year in Counter-Strike ever? But as it stands right now, the championships that they won were obviously incredible, but it's like they just kind of lost steam. I think after they achieved that, what was it, Cologne victory, it's just kind of like we just never really saw the same FaZe again, unfortunately. Like the fire that they brought to the beginning of the year to keep on renewing themselves, to like they were bringing new strats like every single tournament. It felt like they were bringing new ideas. Different people were like going for openers. Like one tournament, the openers would be from Rain. The next would be like Twist, or like Kerrigan would do it, or like Brokey would suddenly have like a 22% attempt rate for openers. Like they were changing things so much throughout the year, or throughout the first half of the year, and we unfortunately just kind of like didn't get to see that anymore. I don't know. I mean, like, let's just move on from that. But Kerrigan was the one that obviously put it all together. He was the one that obviously like got them motivated enough, put them all on board. BlameF did like I asked BlameF on the Snake and Banter we just did about what he thought made FaZe such a deadly force at the beginning of the year, and he kind of said, the way I would summarize what he said is like anyone was willing to take initiative for this team at any given time. And I think that's something that is actually just as much of a system as it being one person that takes the initiative at any given time. Because usually on teams, again, like you usually spearhead your approach, but if you actually can attack from every direction at once, then it's very difficult for teams to understand what you're going to do next and to read your tendencies, because it really doesn't feel like you have tendencies if everybody is so adept in their roles. So runner-up, yeah. Where I wrote down a couple people that I think could be in this conversation, mixed throughout Jame. I think that there was a slight case actually at the beginning of the year for Snappy to have this.
Yes.
I think that Apex actually does deserve a little bit of a nod. I'm not saying he is the runner-up, but I think he deserves to be talked about in this discussion. And I think that's it for me, actually. I don't know if
I would say Cadian deserves a nod too.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Did I say Cadian? I thought I said Cadian.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, okay. Cadian, Jame, Apex, and is that it? Is that our 3?
I've got a pick that you've
just
just never thought of. Nobody's ever thought of this pick, but it makes a lot of sense. And it's Blade, because he is actually the IGL of NaVi. I don't care what anybody says. He's the guy who writes all the fucking notes on the paper. He's the guy that James says, hey, stop doing that. That's cheating. And nobody agrees with him for some reason. But it's Blade. Blade is the IGL of NaVi, and he is definitely the runner-up for me.
Okay.
NAPHONY and
Yeah, I was
would
gonna
agree
make
with
an
that.
NAPHONY joke too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, okay, if we want to be like, I'm gonna give the why it can't be NAPHONY. I'll give that, and we can all think about who the runner-up is. But it can't be NAPHONY because you can't have as many star players as he does and not be succeeding more than and collapsing in the fashion that they have been collapsing this year. Like some of the losses that they had. Some of the losses they had this year were basically like he's just like he's hurting the team. He's literally hurting these players that were doing so well individually, and that's why I the Mau's collapse at the major is another strike against NAPHONY in a series of collapses this year. Where my three biggest collapses for NAPHONY this year are one.
Collapses.
The three biggest collapses are one, losing to Maus on T-side Ancient and not being able to even get into Cave against an Exertion who's a rookie on stage. By running the same strat again and again, not mauling him out of position, not flashing him out of position, running through smokes to try to approach him. So NAPHONY can't. So that's one. The second is them losing at Cologne to Liquid in the group stage because they literally NAPHONY bought a double op and then he saved that op because he got no kills. And then the next round he got the op actually in a post plant position where he was opping and he literally killed nobody. And then the third and the worst one by far is that loss to Imperial at the Antwerp major, where literally it just felt like these kids were pissing themselves the entire, like they couldn't find control like anywhere when they were playing that game. Like I can't even, like, the collapse they had there was what you expect from Complexity at the RMR. Like when Complexity loses that, it's like they're just like they're not even necessarily like world class, you know, and so they can lose to Imperial even though they're the better team because of nerves. But when Cloud9 lose to Imperial, it's like after a while, it's like it shouldn't be nerves. It should be you are so much better than this team. You cannot lose to them. Like nerves and experience can like make a team should make a team that's like rank 8th be the team that's ranked 3rd, but it should not make a team that's ranked 29th beat a team that's ranked 3rd. Like that's not where experience wins you games. It's in the close moments when the teams are already evenly matched to a degree. So NAPHONY is beneath my top 6 IGLs.
I think we're 3 for 3 on podcasts since that Exertion cave hold happened. For Maui mentioning it 3 for 3 times in all of the podcasts since that moment.
It has to keep happening. People have to remember that NAPHONY is still finding ways to keep himself alive on this roster.
And obviously we couldn't have the last episode of It's Server Time without a classic Mauisnake NAPHONY rant. So
it was
very
on
fittingly.
The very middle of the bingo card was NAPHONY.
Yeah.
Everybody gets that space for free. Oh yeah. Okay, so let's get back to the main discussion. What are the cases for? Let's whittle it down. Cadian, Apex, Snappy, and Jame.
Yeah.
I think the weakest case for me right now is actually probably Snappy.
Yes.
Yeah, I just kind of fell off.
I think Snappy showed that he can build a good system. It's just the fact that when he lost a superstar player, he hasn't really been able to build it back. Like, even with decent pieces, like without Spinks, it's just been like Spinks looked like a top 5 rifler in the world in the first few months of the year. It was insane.
Mm-hmm.
But since that point, it's kind of just been like, okay, like he's decent. Like he's had good moments, Snappy that is, but like I don't know. It's just out of that pool, he's easily the weakest in terms of like overall contention, I would say.
I'll make my best Snappy apologist argument here, which is that actually the point of Spinks is points for Snappy and against Apex, because Apex has not been able to use Spinks on Vitality in any degree close to the level of success that he had while on ENCE. And that means to me that obviously Snappy was doing something right, had him plugged into the right spots in the system, was able to maybe, tweak some things mid-round if it wasn't working out. Meanwhile, Apex can't seem to make this guy do his job for whatever reason, and that's, I think the buck stops with the IGL as much as it stops with the individual player in that case. So that's where I'm like, maybe they're more 50-50 in terms of the case being the weakest. Neither of them, for me, Apex or Snappy, get the runners up in this particular angle, but definitely both worth an honorable mention, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I guess let's like wrap that together with Apex there, because you
Sure.
put that forward. So Apex, I probably think is like second or third actually in this discussion for me. Like I actually think I know who my runner-up is now after this, but for me, Apex wouldn't get it, I guess, because of kind of what you're saying. I think the pieces that he has are very strong.
Yeah.
But like they were able to at least to give him some credit. I mean, they won Pro League, so they won an event. And they kind of did it where you look at, if you want to just like be purely stats driven on this, like and why, like, again, like Apex greater than NAPHONY, like they had basically for Vitality, they had Zywoo, who's obviously playing at an astounding level for that, and then they kind of had like Spinks and Magisk, who were doing quite well. They were doing for that tournament, but like none of them were popping off the page. Where like Cloud9 have like two guys that always usually pop off the page with Shiro and Axile. But for Apex, I guess like what's been really difficult to watch for this team has been like just the lack of cohesion, or lack of like yeah, I mean, I guess you would want to say the Spinks setup is really a big portion of why we kind of have to hold that against him. Because if you take a star player, if you were so committed to getting the star player, taking all the pay cuts and everything like that, you would probably do everything you can in your power to win more, so that you can offset your pay cuts you took by winning more prize money. But like, not no one's obviously thinking about the money. But I mean, the thing is like Spinks has just gotten so bad, and I give this like 60% on Spinks, 40% or 30% Apex, 10% nebulous factors associated with Vitality as a whole. And
Okay.
so that's kind of like where I think Spinks should have just like gotten a little better himself. He should like how many times is he going to be like, guys, I can't do this one thing that I need to do, which is anchor bomb sites. Like, why can't you do that? You know, you're supposed to be a pro player. So I would still hold it mostly against Spinks, but I guess with Apex, I think the thing is like we're never always mega impressed with the T sides for them. That's like one thing the eye test has here, where like the other two in Jame and Cadian are just like, I think their T sides just generally speaking look more cohesive and like just better. Like I think map control's taken cleaner, the conversions are cleaner. It doesn't always lead to as many bailouts. Like think of this year, how many times Vitality, when they were doing well or winning games, like they actually need some crazy Zywoo clutch, or like even just like unlikely like a Magisk to just get a weird multi-frag out of nowhere. But like with like Outsiders, it's kind of like, and Heroic, for example, like it just feels like the system is more team oriented. Like it's like trade. Like they get into a bomb site and it's like just like they make it more, they just have like a cleaner route into rounds.
I would say especially for Heroic, there's like very few games where you'll see like two players with 10 kills and one with like 35. Like it's just, you don't see like hyper carry games super often. Usually like a lot of the times you look at the score and it's like, oh, everybody has like 25 to like 18 kills. It's like decently spread out. There's like always a good amount of like team play and trading efforts going into it. So like I've never seen like a massive disparity. Like obviously at the start of the year, Stalin had like a pretty good like individual showing in that, but like ever since they made the change, I think like they've looked in general like much more cohesive in terms of like everybody fragging at an even level throughout series.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you guys want to vote for our runner up? Mix, are you going to be going with Jame for your runner up, or are you going to go with Cadian?
I'm 100% going with Jame. I think
Okay.
I think losing someone like Yekindar from your team,
Yes.
and then rebuilding that team into a major winner, even if like they're not necessarily like an elite team all the time, I think it's just an insane thing to do. I have to give him a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, I think the way that if you value Kerrigan over Glaive, which is me, then you have to realize that, oh, the reason why you're doing that for the most part is because he's proven it so many times under so many different circumstances. And in that sense, you know, Heroic changed a lot less about their system, about their roster than what happened with Jame, obviously, right? So in that sense, I think the case for Jame is very strong if that's the angle you want to take. Whereas, like, obviously in terms of absolute accomplishments and placements, maybe Heroic looked more solid than Outsiders / Virtus.pro, but obviously Outsiders won against Heroic in that grand final of IEM Rio, and it's like, okay, well, that was the moment that Heroic was really supposed to prove that they're a contender, and okay, maybe they did that again in the very next event, but I'm still not 100% sure about that. Like, Outsiders as a team is less impressive accomplishment-wise than Heroic, but I still feel like Jame had a harder task and still got his major W somehow. So I'll also cast my vote very tentatively for Jame over Cadian.
Yeah, I slightly edge out Jame. I think even if you remove the Rio major result, like I would say in terms of consistent placements, Heroic does as a whole impress me a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the fact that Jame managed to rebuild that system after losing Yukender and bring up like Norbert and Fame into this team as well and keep them at that consistent level just puts him over the edge for me. Like it's not by a super large margin by any means, but I think the fact that he managed to prove himself with that roster at the end of the year does just edge him out over Cadian, even though I think as a whole, Heroic's results were a little bit better.
I think you guys have actually more or less stated where my take was going to come from here. That it's like the main deciding factor is the adversity that Outsiders and Jame face this year, which like is so like Heroic made a move which at first people were fairly critical of. I was myself like just like keeping a watchful eye on it, and I was kind of like, this doesn't seem any better. This doesn't seem any better. Okay, it actually is better now. Like that's kind of how that whole path went for them, the Yabi move. And that's kind of like in some ways, like it doesn't even necessarily feel like to me Cadian had to upend his system to make that work for Yabi. It's literally just like the upgrade that what Jame had to do was so much just more impressive as a whole in terms of like he had to rework the system. He had to figure out Norbert can't play certain spots, that Fame should be playing some of these spots. They moved Kicker to a support player. Like Kicker has been playing horribly like as an individual for a while now, and yet they're still finding ways to like go pretty deep in some of these events, like look formidable against different teams. Like Kicker might get kicked from this team pretty soon. Like I don't think this role fits him at all, and I think that even though he's such a legacy player for him and Jame and Doston, like after a while you have to be like, we need a better player for this spot, and it might actually just be Sanji if you're being honest. It actually might be Sanji just took up the role more in stride. No, I would never in no universe think that I'd be saying this today, but actually Sanji took that role and did more with less, actually. Like, Kicker is doing less with more, which is bad for... But to get back to...
So I know this is, like, not necessarily going back, but I remember, like, one of the... It was, like, must have been one of our first episodes, or maybe, like, something after that, where, like, one of the questions was, like, out of, like, these certain players, which one would you, like, be the most likely to build a team around? And it was a bunch of, like, support players, you know what I mean? And I think the one we almost came to the consensus was Sanji. Just because we wanted to see like what he could do. You just like made him your like ultra player and put like all the resources into him and just like see how he played. It'd be interesting to see.
He's like, the thing that's great about Sanji though is like, it's like when if you ever do HLTV fantasy, it's like you're buying a player and so like for anybody that doesn't have this context, every player in fantasy usually is like $200,000 and you get $1 million to spend on your roster. Sanji, in a real life context, like metaphor, would be like a $50,000 player. Like it's so cheap, like so dumb cheap. You get to do everything you want with the other 4 players, and you just get like like Yukender, Jame, Flit. Like it doesn't even matter. Like at that point, it's just like anybody else could be the 4th player.
Give me NiKo. Give me Ziwoo.
Just give me anybody. But like I bringing it back. And to close out this point on Jame, the major victory itself is just the crowning achievement in Counter-Strike. And I think tournament to tournament, it was more impressive than the fall finals. I think also that the way that they were able to rebuild themselves and like so quickly. Like I was watching when they were first playing with that lineup, like dude, they were just losing. Well, they lost to like Movistar Riders, who ended up being a little better than people thought, but like they were like losing to like they lost to G2 in the Antwerp major. I guess that was with Yukindar, but like they
didn't look awful, but they didn't look like they were going to be a top team anytime soon.
Nobody thought they were winning a major, right?
Like that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, y'all remember when Movistar Riders were the number 5 team in the world this year?
And everybody remembers all 5 of their players' names. Yeah. I'll give it to Jame. Let's wrap that one up. Okay. top rifler of the year. So I think there's two choices here, but does anybody have a third that could enter the fray? Does anybody think it could be anybody other than Axile or NiKo?
No, those
No.
were definitely the two.
Okay, then let's just work with those.
No one on Liquid for me has
been.
been consistent enough. Like Nath, Elysian, Yakundar have all had their like lows, especially compared to like Axel and NiKo, so they're all like kind of like a tier below for me.
You know, the problem with
And
this
then-
particular event, or this particular award, if we want to call it that, is like NiKo and Axel both had dips, or their teams didn't succeed enough to give them enough room. So it feels like viscerally, that those two like didn't have a strong and consistent enough year to earn the award. But when you look at like what Mix was saying about the people in Liquid, my runners up or whatever were going to be either Yakinder or Twists. But Yakinder, he has been a bit up and down, and Twists, FaZe does it by committee a lot of the time. He's not even the only star rifler, if you want to use that term, that would be on that team, right? And so he's the guy you would pick, but he's not superfluous compared to the other teams, right? He's not, or superlative. He's not like way above and beyond the rest of the roster. And so it feels like it's not a slight against Twist. It's just that like the rest of his team is good enough that he doesn't stand out massively compared to what a Yakinder we hope will do for Liquid in the future, to a higher level than he did, a more consistent level, especially in playoffs. And, you know, maybe Elige can also be in that conversation. But yeah, so I guess it probably has to be, I still don't feel super comfortable putting Axile there, because I feel like he just had way too few, like some of his matches at the most recent major really spelled it out for me that he's like still not 100% there. He hasn't fully arrived in some of these big games, whereas Shiro obviously was I was way less concerned about in that.
So
I would actually put like maybe even Blame F and Queserado as like below that level. I mean, like it'd go like Axile, NiKo, and then like Blame F, Queserado somewhere just below there.
Yeah,
they're definitely not like top contenders, but they would definitely be like in the top 5.
I was gonna say Blame F in case Serato, but another name that I wanted to mention just because I was looking at him was Frozen, who I feel like has gone under the radar.
I love Frozen, but I don't think he makes my top 5. But I love what Frozen did for Maus this year. Like
I liked the second half of the year a lot.
Yeah,
once they made those changes.
Yeah, I think that the thing about Frozen that's so sick is that he's kind of the veteran, and he's 20 years old or 21.
Yeah,
it's just so hilarious. It's just so amazing.
It's like a baby with a pipe going back in my day or whatever. It's like really.
So see, this is also why I feel actually quite vindicated because I had this take a while ago that was like, Frozen's better than Rops. Like I made that claim a while ago, and the thing is. Now we see when like Rops is kind of supposed to be the guy, that dude on Maus. We saw
dude.
There was just no, like, he was putting up actually insane numbers, but there was like no impact to those numbers. Like they were still getting absolutely shit on, and the rest of the team wasn't great behind him. But like it kind of is some of the same pieces that they have now, and you would even say it's a downgrade. You might be willing to say it's a downgrade if you just kind of look at the names, because it's all these academy players that they have now, and Frozen's that guy now, and they are going deep in tournaments. Like, so Frozen's impact as a player to me is so much more obvious. I think his stats probably are worse than what Rops did when he was at the end of his tenure for Maus, but like the impact is just it's so clear cut to me how he's doing so much more that's actually leading to winning games. And I don't think even the argument that like, oh, but he has like more help, like, does he? Is Torzi like that much better? That like Torzi's a little better than Acor, but is he like, would you say like he's more than 15% better? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think he's that much better than Acor was. Like, I think like you actually look at Torzi as being the weak person on that team now. But okay. For the Axile NiKo discussion, because I keep getting sidetracked. Okay, who's voting for who right now? Let's go, Pronogo. Who would you vote for between Axile and NiKo?
Has to be NiKo. Just obviously won an event. I mean, C9 technically won an event, but whatever. That was so long ago. Won an event most recently. I'll say recently.
It's for the year. It's for the
nah, bro. Like, do you care more about Dallas or the World Finals? I'll just say that.
I think the World Finals is like a slightly. The thing is, Dallas had more teams.
Had more teams, but all of most of them were just like mad, like, oh yeah, we were pulling out for non-COVID related health reasons or whatever Heroic said, and then like all the visa stuff, and then all the stand-ins. It's like Dallas was almost not even like I know you worked there, Maui, but it felt
Dallas
like to me
did
as
have
a
a lot of
viewer,
asterisks.
there was like
but
so
you
many
also can't
asterisks.
discount it as an event. I would say.
I'm not saying it. Yeah.
Like-
So I shouldn't discount it, but I'm just saying it's like they're not the same thing to me. I mean, like the World Finals did have a lot of the top teams and OG. So I don't know, man. Just saying. Anyway, yeah, NiKo mostly wins
Okay,
just
so
because of
you give it
his
NiKo.
peaks. Yeah, his peaks are, and also the fact that, like, again, I said earlier, nobody really felt consistent this year as a top rifler, but I think Axile fell off more when it mattered. To be fair, NiKo didn't even make it to the most recent major.
That's
But
what
Axile's major
Yeah.
games were so underwhelming to me. I can't help but feel like if NiKo did make it to the major, and this is, I don't know where you assign this analysis, but if he did, he wouldn't have done that. So I just feel like NiKo is the better player. And I think also accomplishments do bear that out, but it's a bit harder to argue for that. Insofar as it's like, they're more even or whatever, but I don't feel like they're even as players.
For this year, I'm going with Axel.
All right,
With Axile.
Okay, why?
I mean, honestly, it's like pretty much 50-50 for me. So I'm going with Axile, largely because I've kind of been riding this train for a while, the Axile train. And also,
Hey,
I don't know.
Mix,
I feel like
can you stand up for us and show us what team logo is behind you on that chair by any chance? Is that possible?
But I don't know. I kind of just felt like he's been more consistently there for me just the entire year. Just when I kind of look back at the year and how each one is done, I just felt like Axel. I don't know. I just feel like I saw more from Axel more consistently most of the year. I feel like if you ask me like straight up, I feel like they're pretty 50-50. Like I can understand someone picking NiKo, but for me, I'll go with Axile. I just feel like he had a really good year for the most part, and yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
Yeah, go for it.
it's a really hard call only because I think Axile's had the consistency of not having like multiple roster changes that he's had to undergo this
Yeah.
year, whereas like NiKo's had to have like multiple roster changes come in, systems changed, IGL's changed, so like there's more outlier factors to kind of consider with that. I think just in terms of like the end performance, I would just barely edge it out to Axile only because he's had that consistency. Yeah, it's a really hard call because I think in general NiKo probably has like higher peaks and he's a tiny bit more consistent as like generally year to year. But this year, just based on like the pure results, I'd have to even object to Axel a little bit. Even considering like in Dallas, Axel got the MVP, but for this Blast final, Modesty got the MVP. So like even considering something like that, the fact is that like Modesty was one of the biggest factors in this run for G2, whereas like the Dallas run, it was Axel who was kind of powered up. He also like during the major, yeah, he did kind of go missing early on, but like they stayed in it long enough for him to kind of come back towards right at the end. Obviously, like Shiro and Hobbit were like the big factors there, but even then, like NAPHONY was the problem there. So,
Okay.
it's like really really close. Like this is probably the biggest toss up I would say, but yeah, Axel just gets it for me. I would say.
Okay. So I'm gonna bring up one stat when I was thinking about this that I like a lot, and it also fits the fact that I am picking Axile here. It's the versus FaZe performances, which I find to be incredibly important for the case for Axile, because Cloud9 in some ways kind of became FaZe killers in the latter portion of this year, and the rating that Axile had versus FaZe throughout the year, 1.23, like unreal, like so good for a rifler. NiKo had a 1.14, so and it's basically the exact same amount of maps. I think they both played 13 maps, so it's the exact same spread and sample size. And so I give it to Axile because it's kind of one of those like versus top 5 opponents, but even more specific than that. It's versus the best team of the year who's playing better. And actually, if you do look at versus top 5 opponents, Axile versus top 5 versus top 10, Axile is doing better in later stages of tournaments. Always, like if you look at these numbers, it's like versus top 30 opponents, Axile had a 1.20 for the year, versus top 10 1.24, versus top 5 1.29. He's literally getting better the harder the games are, whereas NiKo and like stayed flatlined. Like he stayed as good as he was versus all opponents this year. Basically no change in performance, which is good. Like I mean, obviously like not many people have that in their like stat cabinet right now, but like it's at the same time, I think that's something that convinces me for Axel, because one of the reasons that I thought, for example, I think like Simple in what was it when he got robbed that second time for me, but or well, either way, I just think big games, the kind of like big game sort of approach to this is where I would take Axile as well. I think like that's kind of what I'm trying to say here. Whereas NiKo, a lot of times like they're never winning. Like NiKo's always a contributing member to the team, but like sometimes he's not actually doing the most. Like even in the G2 versus FaZe series they just played, it wasn't actually like NiKo that really did a lot. It was like Hunter and JKS Clutch, and like even Modesty did better than him. I mean, it's a lot of people that did better than NiKo, but I'm almost never going to see in a series versus FaZe like Axile not just being that guy to do it for them. And maybe that's something to do with roles a little bit, or like positions too, like just kind of being in the right place at the right time. But like I think Axile has just shown me this year when he's playing the stiffest opponents, he's very consistently just a masterful player. So that's my vote for him. Okay. So next category, I actually think this we're kind of taking a while on all these, but I think like this one is also just super clear cut, like top player of the year. Maybe is anybody not saying Simple? No. Okay. Okay. So for runner up, are we actually saying Shiro or are we saying Zywoo then?
I think it has to be Zywoo. It has to be Zywoo because C9 are not a partner team in these leagues. They don't even play most of these events. There's another reason why I would say like the argument for NiKo versus Axile is really hard is that like NiKo didn't make the major, but like C9 didn't play a bunch of these events, and so I don't know where that.
Yeah, but not playing like a blast groups versus not playing a major is like a pretty large difference. I think not playing a major is a very big blight on a record.
Sure,
player. I think so. I think so too. I want to bring up one thing that I think really sells the Zywoo angle here is his redemption arc this year, because he actually at the beginning of this Magisk Dupree lineup, once they started speaking in English, he was playing quite poorly.
Yes.
But then like through that adversity, he became a player that like basically is just like top of the world again. Like he's speaking a second language now, and I think we gave Jame a nod for the adversity he faced this year, despite the fact that maybe he had less overall results or form that was showed consistently versus Katie. And I think the exact same thing has to be said here versus Zywoo versus Shiro, like taking that one extenuating circumstance. And like, I mean, I think just Shiro had less to deal with this year. A lot of things are just built around him. I also think Shiro's stats, generally speaking, are pretty inflated because he saves more than Zywoo. So I give that as a knock against him. Like, that's why if it's just stats for stats, it's kind of like eye test. I think Zywoo has more impact than Shiro. I've seen Shiro like absolutely decimate a series before, like literally just carry Cloud9 on their backs also though. But like, it's actually the only win condition for Vitality.
Zywoo just still looks unstoppable on the server. That's the thing. Like the obviously like yes, Shiro's statistically might have like a slightly better rating, but Zywoo when he's actually playing still looks so in form. It's just I remember at the end of last year when people knew Vitality changes were coming, Zywoo started trying to speak a little bit of English, even in the old roster. Like he was doing interviews at last fall or whatever. And his English wasn't like super good. He was still pretty uncomfortable, but like at events towards the end of this year, he's been like much more fluid. Like it's kind of impressive seeing him adapt over the course of the year and come back to that level, like you were saying, Maui. And especially in these last few tournaments, he's been like absolutely sick. So I think it's hard to really give Shiro the edge when, even though to Shiro's credit, that fucking major performance was sick. Like Cloud9 would have been out so much earlier without him. But it doesn't put him above Vitality, put him above Zywoo just on like overall form throughout the year, I would say.
The one knock against Simple is that at the very end of the year, he looked mortal when he's never looked that in his whole career. But the problem with trying to stack that up against somebody like Zywoo or somebody like Shiro is that, well, Zywoo specifically has just looked like he's himself until it's like the big game. At the, like people have looked through it.
Yeah.
There was a Thorin video recently that people can go back and watch if they missed it. It's like a breakdown of Zywoo's stats like just broadly speaking at some of these big event games where like he shows up in the early stages and then he peters off after, and that is a concern especially if you're trying to overtake Simple at any point in your career. You do need to find that other level. You need to tap into that X factor, whatever that is, that gives Simple like this insane edge. And a lot of people have tried and failed before to be as good as him or to be that level on that level. But I think Zywo can do it. It's just a question of like, will he get to it? And he hasn't gotten to it yet this year. But he's still obviously a very superlative player. He's in the running for top 3 or top 2 or whatever as far as this panel of esteemed analysts goes. So yeah, I just feel like we're looking at, once again, the development of what could be the next Simple. It hasn't been proven yet. Would be really interesting. So it will be very interesting to see where he goes from that. But yeah, I think he edges out Shiro for me just because, as Mauisnake said, he is the win condition for Vitality right now. Even though they have Spinks, he has not been the superstar that we thought he would be. And even though he has these like veterans from Astralis and the coach, obviously, like something is still not clicking with Vitality, as we talked about before. So the fact that Zai was still being really, really powerful and really, really on form, again, admittedly, until some of the big games, is a nice shot in that, a nice little notch on his belt versus on Shiro's, who, there was adversity that was extracurricular, obviously stuff with the war and stuff and all that, but, and of course the Nell posts, we all love Nell posting here. But beyond that, it's just Shiro doesn't seem like he had the same level of like roster instability specifically, if you ignore the fact that his whole org was spot and all that, but you know how it is.
I feel like our answers to this next category will also probably be the same.
For okay, so we'll do favorite series now. This is I think there's only a couple. I think it's more like, again, I think okay, so let's just go. What's your guys' favorite series of the year?
Gotta be the Cologne Grand Final.
That's the obvious pick, just like Simple is the obvious pick. The Cologne Grand Final.
Again, we got to do runner-up. Yeah, runner-ups.
So, but I will throw out a few others. I think the Antwerp Grand Final wasn't as nail biting as the Cologne Grand Final. That was obviously the FaZe major win, but it was still a good major final, which for some reason is actually very rare down the years. It's like 30% of them are actually good for whatever reason. So there is that. I also think that the FaZe Spirit semifinal was a very hype matchup.
That was actually going to be my runner-up.
That would be personally my runner-up. The other contender that I can think of is, if you want a bit of recency bias, would be the heroic win over FaZe in the fall finals, the last fall finals. So that was another match that I thought went the distance, was compelling, was interesting. And I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get like an all-time great series or whatever, or something that could at least be a year-round, runner-up at these World Finals. Because if we had gotten something that was like a really hype match on Anubis, maybe that would be even more exciting. It didn't end up happening. It's just the luck of the draw. You can't always get like a one for the ages every tournament, obviously. But so yeah, for me, it would be the Cologne Grand Final or maybe that Spirit semifinal against FaZe at Antwerp. And so those are like my 1 and 2. And the others, 3 and 4, whatever order, really.
So I've got 2 runner-ups. So one that actually came immediately to mind for me was I really enjoyed Fury versus NaVi from the Brazil Major.
Yes, yeah, I did too. I was gonna put that in mind, probably.
Yeah, I felt like the atmosphere of it was just really nice, and it was just A plus atmosphere. And the other one that's like even more of a runner-up, like this is not only I would have said, but it's probably just because of like the personal investment I have, like watching the people involved. Was I got really into Complexity versus Imperial in the final match.
That one was crazy.
I actually think that's a really good shout, dude. We were up till like 1 a.m. in like we weren't even there. We were at the Europe RMR in Malta, and we were sitting there like flipping our shit in our Airbnb watching that match.
Yeah, like just obviously just like the investment I have from like knowing the Complexity guys and having been with them, and then obviously it being the Brazil Major, Imperial trying to fucking qualify to get to that stage was really intense, and it was a really good series.
Yeah.
Honestly, Imperial had a few good series this year.
They did.
They were a very exciting team this year.
They did have some really good ones, actually. I kind of think we've maybe slightly overlooked the Kato Grand Finals here. Like I guess like that one was really good because it was I loved it. I mean I liked it a lot, but like something felt like I guess kind of like the strength of G2 just kind of so for some reason, even though I was watching it and invested, I kind of just always felt like FaZe were gonna win that. Like I don't know, I just some reason it just didn't feel as tense for me at other moment as some of these other series we're talking about. Whereas like I don't know why, and maybe that was just kind of that impenetrable feeling or unstoppable feeling that FaZe had earlier in the year, where it just felt like they're just gonna get it done. Like this, just I know it's gonna happen. But I liked my favorite overall BO3 of the year was Cloud9 FaZe Dallas actually quarterfinals.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that was my all 2022 favorite BO3. I thought, I mean, like what Axile did there is also kind of what seared into my brain to make him my rifler of the year.
Yeah,
because that's when he just ascended and like I also say that's the series that saved NAPHONY's career because if they didn't have that trophy, what did they accomplish this year? If they don't have that one trophy, if Axile didn't go actually God mode there, then like who's saying that this lineup is still the same 5 people right now, right? Because it would be Shiro and Axile and maybe Hobbit, and then you'd probably swap out 2 players. So that one, in terms of impact, was mega. It also like was one of the few notches against FaZe earlier in the year because it felt like they were again so tough to beat. There was probably some major hangover there, but I actually thought that was incredibly competitive. Like I don't think the major hangover is like the best descriptor for what happened there because like it was the maps for 16-14, 16-13, 16-13. Like, dude, they were all super competitive. It's not like anybody was just lying down. And Cloud9 even had to make a big comeback on the last map too. It wasn't even like FaZe were up 12-7, and then Axile just said, "Fuck it! Like I'm winning this game. I'm winning this series for us right now." And so that one felt like it reminded me of like what the star power in Counter-Strike could actually do for a rifler. Yeah. So there's that one. I think a lot of the ones you guys said already were really good, so I'm not going to repeat them. Other than the Imperial Cloud9 one was just, I mean, Imperial Complexity one was just like that was an edge of the seat kind of game.
I mean, Imperial had 2 fucking bangers this year, so
I think also. Yeah.
They had the one at the first major, right? And then they had the other one in front of the crowd.
Well, when they beat Gambit or Cloud9 or whatever at the first major was pretty. Yeah. That was unbelievable. Yeah. That was just like so unbelievable too.
Even the Imperial Cloud9 game at this last major was also pretty sick.
Yeah,
it was like the revenge arc, the OT.
Yeah,
it was pretty sick.
Yeah, that's true. There was a lot of good ones. Like
it wouldn't have been a best of 3, would it? Or was it? Was it a best?
It was a BO3. It was a BO3.
They lost to 9Z in the best of 1. I thought that was a best of 3 for some reason.
Imperial were up on map 1 15-11 against Cloud9, and on map 2, Imperial were up 15-6. They could have 2-0'd. They could have 2-0'd Cloud9 at 2.
Dude, it was like the score lines from the MLG major. Literally, like the score lines from the MLG major almost. From when Luminosity were up against Liquid, like same 2 kind of score lines, right? It was like 15-9 and 15-6 in that major or something.
That swapped them, yeah.
That Luminosity versus Liquid series is the most pain I've ever been in watching Counter-Strike. I think that was absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Okay. I think that wraps up this topic. I mean, like all of these in premise were actually like, just like the number one's obvious, but then except for the rifler, I guess. But then the number 2s are what's more interesting. Yeah. But the last is it's not even really a category for 2022. It's what we are thinking about for the future, and it's who's going to thrive in 2023. So looking at the general landscape right now, guys, we see that I'd say you have a couple like unlikely suspects from maybe where they were earlier in the year, marching their way into the top 10. But where do you think, like, if you had to right now pin a team who's going to have the best 2023, and obviously it's very tough to know all the roster changes, but if you are thinking about that, that's fine. Then who are the teams that you're going to pick that are going to, in your opinion, have the best 2023s?
Astralis.
Oh my god, no.
I think they're going to be back. They're going to be back.
If they find a 5th that is like
Buzz is actually like I feel like people, because they don't know Buzz, are underrating him. He's not actually a bad player. Pretty decent.
I don't know.
He's also been playing, so like all these FaZe games Device has been playing for the last year, Buzz has been playing with him a bunch.
Oh, he's his pug buddy.
He's
This
a
is
fun
like
buddy.
this is like Bemis from
Okay.
NiKo and FaZe Clan way back in like 2018 or whatever
Yeah.
it was. He's just
With-
like,
with-
oh, this
with-
guy's
Yeah.
gonna be great, and then bye, not in our team. Though.
I think Astralis are gonna make. I don't think, like, don't get me wrong. I don't think they're gonna be like top one or anything, but I do think that they'll be like
Is a bounce
once
back.
again contender. Yeah, they will bounce back quite significantly. I think.
Do you
Mm.
guys think FaZe will bounce back?
Yeah,
How do you think they'll come into the year? Do you
Dude,
think, because I'm not
I-
sure, like the break could refresh them, like the player break, and then
Yeah.
getting some weeks off with the holidays coming back could reignite them, or they could come back and just still feel flat, which would be really bad.
I think that
I'm
like,
not sure.
the fact that their baseline seems to be like top 4 at these big events, obviously the major being a very big black mark against them, but beyond that, it's like, okay, they're like what people don't remember when like people are like, obviously the fans can be consumed by recency bias, and maybe some people will say that about me because I said NiKo over Exile, but what I would just say is FaZe made it to playoffs in every event other than the Rio Major. They were in top 6 or whatever playoffs every single event. I went back and checked, and it's like you don't that doesn't mean that you have an era necessarily, but when you combine it with the fact that you were the team to beat in the first half of the year, and then you were still in title contention for the last 2 big events of the year as well. Again, not an era, right? There is no real era, but these guys have the ability to do that, and to do that consistently, and to do that against whoever is the top dog or the contender, the underdog, whatever, whoever might else be the title contender. And that to me is like, I don't think that just goes away. There needs to be more of a very specific reason for that to fade away. And I haven't seen what that reason would even be for FaZe. Like, maybe Rain doesn't get his major MVP performance back or something, but they have a team that's multifaceted and can adapt to that. It feels like they actually have, like, Heroic is the one that does it by committee that people always point to. FaZe does it by committee at a higher level, and I feel like that insulates them from needing to make any other roster changes, and means that they should actually still be a contender going into 2023. I would say they're like the most obvious lock for it, actually. I don't really think there's another team that you can say is like guaranteed to be a title contender. You could say there's very likely, but who would be more guaranteed than FaZe at this point?
I would argue, I'll say who I think is most likely to just have consistent placements next year, and why I think they are going to do better than FaZe is that I think Heroic are still hungry for a major. And I think that's something that FaZe right now, just kind of like ever since they did win that Cologne, it doesn't feel like they've brought themselves back to that level. And then I think you're going to have to actually start holding people accountable for what they're not doing for FaZe very soon. And I think, like, for example, one guy that felt to me like he was over the hump, and I'm surprised to see the resurgence that he had this year, has been Rain. And I think Rain, for example, is like, to me, the first that needs to go if FaZe want to actually keep things fresh. And like, geez, just imagine, like, instead of a Rain, what if FaZe were able to be like the ones that snagged a person like Yakindar, who's also super hungry for something moving forward? I mean, I don't think Yakindar's going anywhere from Liquid per se, but also, like, why not Frozen? Why not somebody that can kind of play a lot of the same roles as Rain? And then you just upgrade again. But I think that with Heroic right now, they still have that chip on their shoulder where they've now tasted blood in terms of taking down the fall finals. But they know that's a legitimate tournament, but they know it's not a major. They know it's not a Cologne. They know it's not a Kato. And I think going into Katowice, I think actually I would pretty safely right now expect that bookmakers would put Heroic as the number 1 team, like, in terms of like odds. So I think that go throughout the year until they win their major, I think that Cadian's going to be as hungry as ever, because he knows Cadian's a guy that also, like, is so hyper aware of storylines too, and legacy, and what all that means. And that right now, if Cadian were to leave his career, even though he is on the older side of players, he's 27, he's still not as old as like someone like Kerrigan and someone like even Rain. He's younger than Rain. So, like, I think that he still has a couple more years to give, and he knows that this is his final, like the major, or like one of those other prestige tournaments. That's what he needs to actually feel accomplished. And so I think he's going to bring that fire. Whereas Kerrigan right now, like, he got his major, and I just, like, him missing so badly on the Rio one makes me think, like, I don't know if he's going to, like, reignite himself. That's why I think Heroic over FaZe for my team to smash the next year.
I feel like Kerrigan was definitely trying with FaZe to win, and the reason why they ended like it was a gambit in a sense, a gamble to pick Vertigo and a really like heavily prepped Vertigo, a map that was previously their perma. They wanted to get to a 7 map pool, which would have made them untouchable if it had actually succeeded. But when you prepare on one thing, necessarily you have less time to keep drilling the other stuff. I feel like that was a major contributing factor to their embarrassing set of circumstances at the Rio Major. And I don't think that was lost on them either. And I think with the map pool change, it actually opens up quite a bit. We see they're rife for the title of top 1 Anubis team right now after this event, right? And it's like something that, you know, you are going to have to work hard to take that away from them. So that plus, if you're going to cut Rain, he's so crucial and brings so many intangibles to the team, you would need to replace him with somebody who Kerrigan, at the very least, has played with in the past, which would be a Frozen, actually, if you wanted to go that route. But I wouldn't really necessarily be able to pick, like, my short list would be very short if I was thinking players that could replace Rain and not nuke the whole chemistry of the team. So that would be something that I think is really, really hard to call. I said it before the Rio Major that I was still taking FaZe as the favorite, which obviously looks silly now, but everybody looks silly with their predictions of that major. And the reason for that is until they've proven that they can't win, then that's the time you give up on them, when they've proven they can't. But until then, you have to say that they can. And I think it's too early to call, even though obviously we all want, like, one of the major things that happened this year is that no team, besides FaZe was the team to beat, but no team was just completely ineffable and couldn't lose a series. We didn't have an Astralis type from the era of Astralis. And I think if we do get back to that, some people will say that's boring. I think it's fodder for everybody else to improve. It's the reason why FaZe Clan got ROPS to begin with, is maybe that always would have happened, but the reason why they did that and became the best team of 2022 is because NaVi was the greatest team of 2021 and just stomped that Stockholm major and made everybody make roster moves as a result. So that's like one of those things where I think it sort of supercharges everybody else. And now we're entering into that period where teams will individually, if they're hungry enough, as Mauisnake said about Heroic, make their changes or do their, style changes. But like when every team is sort of like maybe in the running, you are going to get that era of stagnation where nobody really wants to rock the boat. Maybe they can be like Liquid and cruise at 6th or whatever, and not make any changes, that it's not time yet. And I feel like FaZe can easily take back the next year in the same form that they took the first one. Like this past year versus this next year, the landscape is not going to be that different in terms of the opponents that FaZe face. Biggest change could be Heroic, but that remains to be seen.
Note in mix. Who do you guys think also might come up, or actually like, or who do you think that it's going to be a 2023 for FaZe or for Heroic or somebody else? And I know you already said like you think Astralis is going to be a team that's kind of sneaks in, but like
not necessarily in like top 2, but I think that they'll definitely like be a bit more contentious, like maybe in a top 5 position pretty consistently. Not at the early portions of the year, obviously, because they're not at Kato, but they will be able to rise back to that level. Like I think people are underestimating just how good Device is going to be, considering he's shown that he can actually come back with a consistent level.
Actually, let's make this a little more interesting. Who kind of like, who is a team that's like not necessarily top 5 or so, and I would say don't just look at the rankings per se, but like who do you think is one that people aren't really crediting right now, but you think has a lot of room to grow, like a big grower, but not necessarily a shower at the moment?
NIP with Alexi B at the helm seems like a project you could invest in at this point. Obviously, they didn't have a great major, but they followed it up with a very promising fall finals. So I think that's and I've always rated Alexi B. I know people maybe had a crisis in confidence with him after the OG project, and then obviously after G2. And it was a really weird move that NIP picked him up at all, but I can't say I'm disappointed after seeing the most recent time that team has had an outing. So I feel like they'll be drilling pretty hard going into the next year. So could see them rise up.
I'd give Fnatic a little shout out too. I think that we can see them, like, I don't know where they'll end up, but I think that they will remain like a consistent top 10 team in the year. I just don't know like what their peak is quite yet. Like they've shown like generally consistent improvement as this roster, and I think like everything that I see when I watch them is like good signs. I just don't know where they'll end up with some of these other teams, like kind of also fluctuating. Like it's kind of hard to get a beat on what the level of some of these teams will be comparatively. But I think Fnatic, if they continue their kind of growth, even if it tapers off a little bit, even if they keep mustering like a little bit of growth as they go, I think that they will be like a pretty decent contender. They'll probably be like that upset team that like breaks a team in the quarters or like stops a team from getting playoffs that we should usually see. I don't know if they'll be like a title contender. I have my doubts on that right now.
Makes you have a team that you think is going to grow?
I don't know even about grow, but I'm really curious to see where Mouse ends up and kind of where their trajectory actually takes them.
Yeah,
I really was kind of thinking that too.
Yeah. Like I'm really not sure like where they're gonna go, to be honest. Just because last time we saw them at the major, it was where they had a pretty good run.
Top 4.
Yeah, top 4. Like I wonder if they'll be able to like hit the top 5 consistently. Like I don't know. Mouse is the team I'm like most interested to see next year, to see like what kind of form they come out with. And I think they could. And I think if they came out like in good form, it would actually surprise a lot of people still.
I want to throw out Spirit. I think Spirit has like no reason that they should get worse. I think Wonderful is still like getting adjusted to pretty much playing tier 1 CS, and he's already playing very well. And that's really cool, because this team looked dire when I watched them at ESL Pro League. I thought they were horrible. And then I started seeing them more, and I was like, Jesus Christ, I have to start paying attention to this team. And then I'm like so pleasantly surprised by basically the roles just seem to fit very well for them, for one. I think they kind of have that like prototypical IGL that's sort of aggressive and chopper that's going to like kind of make space. He kind of like uses himself a little bit like Kerrigan. Then you have Patsy, who is like probably actually top 3 entry fragger this year, if like top 5. I could safely say that, actually. Top 5, I could safely say. Top 3 is a little bit much because they haven't played enough, but I think that he has been unbelievable for them. And then Wonderful has this kind of weird passive style of opping, but he's so good at it that it's kind of it's very hard to like even compare him to a player, because he kind of is just like, I noticed Wonderful is just holding these like really kind of like far angles to try to support. He's like a support opper that can kind of flick between angles very frequently, so he can actually watch multiple angles to get that his team can get peeked from at the same time. And I'm like, I don't know anybody else that's doing that, and he's like doing it at such a high level that I think Spirit's just going to be a really tough team for people to play against, given especially. But the only thing that's holding them back, obviously, is not a partner. So you kind of like, when are you going to actually get to see them play, and they have to like always qualify for tournaments, so that might hurt their chances eventually. But I think that that's a team that I would not be surprised if they're able to make it back to the top 5. Beyond that, it's hard to like really pick anybody. But yeah, I think Spirit's kind of my team that I think is going to like shoot up again. So yep.
It's a good shot.
I'll say Snappy will rise even more after one roster change.
One roster change.
And somehow G2 will also rise after one roster change. That's
what?
Weird. I can't believe that those are connected.
No, my God. You're trying to say that Snappy for Hooksy.
I can't believe. That's not happening. I don't know how that could happen exactly. But it feels like
that ain't
somehow those two are connected somehow. I don't know.
That Snappy ain't walking through that door.
Why not? What's wrong?
Because they're okay. They like Hooksy. Okay, let's do the Patreon questions we have. Let's do the Patreon queues. We're coming to the end, guys. It's approaching slowly, but we've got a few here. Actually, we have 5 now, because some people put some in today.
Yep.
Let's see. Did anybody put one in the last?
I've been refreshing over time. Let's see.
I'm going to refresh my notifications too, actually.
Nothing.
Nope.
Nothing since
nothing
the
new.
latest editions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we got 5 for the last episode. I'm just going to put it out there publicly so people there's transparency here. This Patreon will still exist after, but I'm going to shift it to becoming my channel. So if you're our sub right now and you want to support me, some of the money on something I'm working on, this is a little confusing. So basically, this month is paid out to everybody here, divided equally by 4, which is like how we've been doing this for the entirety of the show. But what next month is going to be. The payments are going to go to me, but also I think I have this payment plan for Pronogo because he's helping me out with some other stuff I'm doing. So you're basically, from this point forward, after this month's payments, you're paying me for the Patreon, and a little bit goes to Pronogo for the next few months after that. And then everything's going to come to me unless I need help, then I'll start paying people again. But that's just how it is and how it stands. So let's get into the first Patreon question here. This was submitted November 30th from Badroenis. If Valve asked you to balance the M4s, how would you do it? Oh, Jesus Christ. Wow.
Is this before the change? It can't be, right?
Wait, when did it come out? When did it come out? The M4 A1S change. I almost feel like it had to.
Maybe it was after that, yeah.
This is also something we've said like 50 times on the episodes.
Oh no, like it had happened. Yeah, it happened.
November 18th.
Yeah, November 18th. So he did write this after.
Yeah.
So he actually wants to know.
He wants to know if we would do it differently or in
okay. So yeah. And P.S. He says, should diffuse kits be cheaper? Ooh. The diffuse kit. Okay. Well, actually. Okay. I mean, if you want to work these two questions in tandem, I guess. Yeah. I guess what I wouldn't mind seeing is the A1S increasing back to 3100, and then also the diffuse kit decreasing by like $100 or something like that. But I don't think that's kind of a weird. I don't know if this change needs to happen.
The other thing you could do, and I don't know why this hasn't happened yet, to be honest. I mean, besides the fact that it's like a rat's nest of programming in there. So don't look. If you ever have the opportunity to look at the leaked source code for Counter-Strike, don't do it. If you have any programming knowledge, it's just going to make you very sad. But the kit should just be throwable, because then my rich player on the CT side can just drop kits. So I don't know. That seems like something that would have added to the. If you're gonna go the route where like the nade dropping is super tactical, yeah, exacgly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why it's not happening, because it's a really difficult thing to actually program in. But if you're gonna explode the Men in Black out of your mind, then that seems like a fine thing to do if you're building stuff from the ground up. Because then again, if you're like, Valve agrees with the principle that dropping the nade thing is a positive change for the game because they haven't rolled it back. So why not do that, right? And so that just like adds to that, where it's like, I can drop the bomb, I should drop the kit. Also, buy the bomb. Just saying.
Buy the bomb.
To answer the first part of the question, I actually feel like the M4s are quite well balanced right now, minus maybe the economy side of it. That's like the only thing that I would say is like a little questionable, is like one costing 29, one costing 31. I think as in terms of like actual weapon balance, they're quite fairly placed at the moment. I think Valve did a pretty good job with this last update. I definitely would wish that you could pick from both guns during the game. That's like one of the big factors, because like it would also change, like maybe one round you get an A1S because you can only you want an extra flash or something. Like it does enable like a little bit more of diversity there, but
just replace the FAMAS with the A1S, bro. Nobody uses the FAMAS. Get it out.
I mean, NaVi loved the FAMAS for some reason. It's such a disgusting weapon.
Some people love the UMP
doesn't even,
too, so I don't know what's up.
I feel like Bit buys it, and it's not even that good for him. So like, every time I see him have it, it's like he doesn't finish the kills. It's like sad.
Exactly. So I think on that side, it's pretty okay. Maybe I would reduce the. I mean, you said you want to increase the A1S price, but I would say
decrease diffuse kit price.
At the same time. I would say maybe just decrease the A4 price by $100 and bring it to 3,000 and have it kind of there. I don't know if diffuse kits should be cheaper though. Like the game already leans a little towards the CT side by default.
Yeah.
I don't know if we really need like further opportunities for teams to like be able to win CT rounds in that side. Like it is like $400 is a decent bit of money to like, if your economy isn't super great, you do like consider, do I get like a smoke or a kit, or do I get like 2 flashes or a kit? Like it is a choice. Whereas if you decrease it, it becomes like less of a factor, and I don't necessarily like that. Like I like having the idea of like maybe sometimes only 2 players can afford a kit and the other 3 will have to like scavenge it, and you might lose a round because you don't run over the kit. Like it does like that kind of stuff is kind of interesting and adds a factor to the game versus like making it cheaper and letting everybody have one. I don't think that would necessarily. I think $400 is a pretty good price for it.
Yeah, I think it's good too. I don't think it should be changed. He's asking, should diffuse kits be cheaper? I'd say no. I'd say yeah. EasyPete asked December 16th, how long should Navi continue to view Electronic as their only solution to leadership? Context. In an interview with PlayGG at the end of their Blast World Finals run, Blade essentially states that Navi is in a development stage with, at the very least, Electronic as IGL and maybe even NPL as another player to add. Well, he said this now twice now. I think he said this at the Fall Finals and at the World Finals, from two different sources, that they don't really have any other options to go to. Like, what's out there is out there. They know what's out there. And so they are running with this Electronic as IGL project. So, I mean, you guys have what are your guys' thoughts on, I guess, the first part of his question, how long should Navi continue to view Electronic as their only solution?
0 days.
Yeah.
So you think they just switch right now?
I wish they would. I wish they
would too.
Yeah, I just don't think Electronic, like, his performance has suffered from it.
Yes.
It's pretty clear. Yeah. And I don't think losing Electronic as their, like, second to third rifler is a good, like, it's just not a good solution for them long term at all. Yeah. Like, I don't know what the in-game leader solution would be for them, but I don't think that having Electronic do it is good for them for the foreseeable future. Like, it's already proven to not, like, have elevated them back to the level they were at before, or close to it. And then, like, I don't know, it's just not gonna, like, from looking at the way the other teams are coming up as well, it's not gonna make Navi a championship contender if Electronic's performance continues to suffer, which I don't see it not.
All you need to know is that besides talking about Simple as the best player of the year, we did not touch on Navi at all this entire episode, because that's how irrelevant they've started to become, which is sad.
Yeah.
Like, as a top, like, title contender or whatever. Obviously, they're still, like, maybe in the top 10, right? But, like, for me, I look at Navi and I'm thinking, yeah, in a world where politics wasn't a part of it, they would just pick up Jerry. But for one, Jerry is, like, chained to a Fours basement somewhere. Like, he's just never getting out of that. And then for another, obviously, they're not interested in picking up Russian players. So my radical proposal is that they go and grab, of course, I'm blanking on his name now, but he just signed with EG. You guys know what I'm talking about. The Kazakh IGL. Nealon. Yeah, that guy. Get him in.
Nealon.
Get Nealon in. Guy knows how to call an aggressive T side.
Okay. That's a unique one.
Sure, Blake would hate every step of that, but just saying.
I actually see a world, though, where Electronic starts to understand the role, especially given the break that's coming up. Like, I completely discredit their spring finals victory being Electronic's doing, because he basically just got to play his roles, and everybody just, like, I mean, everybody just basically played what they were already doing, but they just used the system of the last tournament that they played in with upgraded firepower. But I think, like, I would probably give until the first major of the upcoming year, and then I would pull the plug on it if they don't, like, if it's a disaster, and by Navi standards, a disaster is not making playoffs, then you just have to stop doing this. Like, you cannot continue as an org such as Navi having sub playoff results. Like, that's where it's really bad. But, like, I mean, I don't want to. I hate giving time. I think giving time is one of the weakest things to say in this entire space, because people's skill is so fleeting in Counter-Strike. That's why I'm always like, cut NAPHONY, cut this guy, cut this. Like, please, like, just use the prime of everybody to the fullest extent.
Yeah.
Simple is such a huge outlier that you kind of can expect that he's going to be good for a little bit longer. But even him, he did a little bit worse at the end of this year, and you never know when that fall is really starting. And so, yeah, I would say the absolute longest you can go with this idealistic worldview that Blade has is probably like 5 months, and that's when the Paris major is over. I think it's May, right? So just that, and then if they don't make top 4, this is over for me. Actually, it's not even top 8; it's got to be top 4. So next question. Who are all of the superstar riflers in the world outside of NiKo?
Well, Exile won
like we kind of
event by majority vote here, so I think that's an obvious pick.
And this is a question from firsoch, December 18th. Yeah, obviously he didn't know what we were going to talk about earlier in the episode, but we had a pretty lengthy discussion about all the riflers. I guess we didn't really get into, like, all the superstars, like I think we've kind of touched on this topic before about who are the superstars right now and like what it means to be a superstar versus like a star.
Yeah.
And I think
Serato is definitely there.
yeah, I think you could put actually like maybe five superstar. How many superstars do you guys think there are right now? I'd probably say under 7 or under for sure.
Yeah,
So-
there aren't a ton.
Yeah, I'm kind of
So-
tempted to reach for Stown, but also Heroic are such a team unit that I don't know if, like, just the same way that you might not say Twists or whatever because of FaZe working it together. Like, you know, I don't like, part of it is like, do you really want to take credit away from the individual players? But also, if the team is so good at working it together that those individual players aren't as absolutely necessary to like solo carry the whole game, then they don't have the opportunity to show as much of their superstar prowess.
Would you say Yakinder's a superstar rifler?
That's one where it's like you kind of have to like really lay out. Do you think like by personality and like gravitas in the space is he a superstar? Because like we all knew that was going to change a lot for Liquid, but like total impact in the server is very high for Yakindar. But he's like, I don't think he like touches the superstar level for me as an individual. It's just kind of like all the surrounding factors like clout he kind of does now. He's starting to get there, but it's not quite the same. I think my superstars right now are Axile, BlameF, NiKo, and I guess Serato. I think those are my 4. I think that's it.
Yeah, those are the 4 that are definitive, I would say. Then you also have like, it's just interesting because like there is definitely like outliers, and then there's also people who you would say are the superstars for their team, but aren't superstar riflers. Like you could say Patsy is a superstar for Spirit, but he's not a superstar rifler in the world. It's just you can see how the path up there is. So
Frozen's the superstar for Maus.
Like, at that point, I would just probably just say he's their star player, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Elige or NAF are sometimes the star. Like that's why they're kind of not. I guess Flit's the star of outsiders actually. It's kind of weird. I found it so weird actually. I'll just random rant, but like it was getting like it was a little odd for me, the whole like outsiders narrative during the major where people were almost like not talking about Flit enough because everybody was so swept away by Fame.
Yes.
Because Fame like came up in a way that was very shocking, but it was almost like, guys, Flit's just been the stable 1.2 force for them every game. Like what he did in the grand finals too was just like he just wiped the floor with everybody. Like it was I think Flit is pretty close to being a superstar because it's almost like his performances are being taken for granted completely now. And that's the trademark of a superstar, is that when he's not putting up a 1.2, we're like, where's Flit? It's like that. What are we holding this guy to now? Like, I don't know, but like, I guess people just don't talk about outsiders in general enough still. Next question. SpruceMoose, crazy fact for you guys: you were born naked, and when you die, you are also naked. Mind equal blown.
I mean, by what fucking metric, dude? Like, what? How do you know I'm gonna be naked when I die? Are you seeing the future?
Seriously.
I was confused when I read that too.
I don't think most people die naked. Actually, I don't think that's actually
not with that
true.
attitude. They don't.
Yeah. You too can die naked if you try hard enough. I guess. I don't know. It just seems like this is one of those questions, Maui, where you're like, well, thanks for the money, and next, like what is?
Yeah.
Where's the rest? Not even a question, actually.
Not even a question. Okay, well, thank you, SpruceMoose, for contributing on the final episode of It's Server Time. But Zac Patel gets the final question of all patrons in the history of It's Server Time, asking just a couple hours ago, what's one thing that makes you optimistic and one thing that makes you pessimistic for the state of CS in 2023? I like this question. I like this question. Actually,
should we start with the pessimistic side so we can end on an optimistic note? Is that how we're going to play this off?
So the bad before the good?
Sort of,
Okay.
Just a thought. I don't know. Whatever.
Sure. What's your? I'll try to. Let me see. Does anybody have one right now? Does anybody have one? A pessimistic thought. Okay. What's it? Note. What's your pessimistic?
If the tournament schedule remains the way it is, it kind of sucks. In the sense of like having, for example, like the second half of this year was just kind of shitty with like EPL being a month and a half, blast groups, and then like the major and then 2 blast events. It's just kind of like, okay, like it's not
kinda
as it's not it's just not enjoyable, especially compared to like previous years where you'd have like a very dense packing of events. It also like fucks with the rankings. It fucks with like the way teams are kind of like uh uh just like the
Too
way
many.
you look at their form at the end of the year. It's just like not super clear cut and not an enjoyable like spread of
There's
events.
there's so many like different fucking group stages now
Yeah.
just because of these leagues, and it's like I get they want to like have like their hours up and shit, but like, god damn it, it's like every single event has like a 1 month group stage full of
Yeah.
like matches that just don't end up fucking mattering at all. And it's really
Yes.
annoying.
Yeah, I think if the start of the events could be somehow truncated without, like, the format needs to adhere to something that still respects competitive integrity. Can't have like best of ones all over the place, obviously. But if we can get away from like round robin and maybe some Swiss system stuff, like if we can go back to the GSL groups, I think that would be superior
some more
in
like
general.
some more like clear cut stuff, because I don't know, like something I like about CS a lot, right? It's just the overall format of like the scene and just kind of like how it works. So it was very similar to say like tennis or something, where it's very much you're going from like event to event, and like, you know, the way you like dominate for say isn't just necessarily win your matches by like dominating event to event and that type of thing. And there's always like different winner or whatever. I don't know. I always really like that vibe of the scene. And so when the scene just becomes, if it just becomes like a shit ton of blasts and EPL groups for fucking like 4 months out of the year, it just becomes, I don't know, really annoying to watch.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing like a couple more events that just run from like a Tuesday to a Sunday, whole event plays out, group stage into playoffs, done. Like
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than a month of groups and then like this weird like playoff bracket as well where it's like 2 teams go directly to the semis and or like the quarters, and it's just like I fucking hate that format so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you with that format type of stuff. I like when it's just like the way the major is nice is that it's like actually just a bracket. Like,
Yeah.
you know, top 8 make it, which for its other flaws, like what you could say about Swiss, I suppose. Like I actually
And best
don't
of
think
ones,
and mostly the best of ones actually. I think the Swiss is fine if it were just BO3s, because then it would feel a little less random. Even though BO1s usually do show the better team, but like still there are upsets that shouldn't be happening in, I think, most of our eyes. I'll say something, I guess, on the slightly optimistic side, is that I think there might be a couple TOs that are sort of teasing that they're getting into the space, like
I hope
that
so.
Elisa type of thing, like the CCT sort of stuff. Like, I think like what I hope alleviates the concerns that you just brought there with the pessimism is that I think that there's a couple people that are starting to feel it out again. And so hopefully that honestly works out for some of those. Hopefully they find it financially viable, that they get enough exposure and good turnover. And I think, like, for example, people are saying that Perfect World might have the second major of the year, or like I guess that might be run in tandem with PGL or something. I don't know how that'll work, but like if you can expect, like, it'd be really cool to see just a couple of those TOs back in the space. But I guess something that is pessimistic about this is that a lot of the TOs were in the Ukraine and Russian space, which doesn't seem like it's getting any better. It's not getting considerably better. And so like some of those TOs that we wanted to hope for to come back, Star Ladder, Epicenter, We Play, they're in very poor situations themselves. So that's two sides to the coin.
I'll just say, as far as pessimistic points go, the fact that the big dogs that remain are now flirting with or outright bought out by these, we'll say the people we're not really super happy about. Obviously, the esports washing angle has started to come into the full focus of people who are enthusiasts in the space. Would be nice if that didn't have to be sort of psychologically in the back of my mind while I'm trying to enjoy an event at the tier 1 of Counter-Strike. But I don't know what all anybody can do with that. That's just something that you sort of have to take with the bad with the good, as they say, or just stop watching. And who the fuck wants to stop watching Counter-Strike? The best esport still being played right now. So it's that's a pessimistic note, probably to end all pessimistic notes, to be fair. But that's just something that comes to mind for me. It's always sort of nibbling away there in the back.
Okay.
What?
I
I was gonna have an optimistic point too.
Let's
Yeah,
go.
come on.
That
I gotta turn it around.
in that I'm excited for Blast to have a major next year. I think it's gonna be
yeah.
really fucking good.
Yes.
all around production wise. Just the fact that it's going to be in Paris, there's going to be European crowds. It's going to be like, I think like every element of that just is exciting. I don't know if there's been news about it or anything, but I hope that they manage to get like English casting in the arena. I know that there's like laws that prevent that in France or whatever, but I hope that somehow they manage to work that out.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to see Blast host a major next year, and also I think like the fact that the schedule has shifted a bit to have the majors at the end of the season is also kind of nice, where you have like teams going out on that note a little bit. I mean, I think I'm not sure if I'm 100%. I think like Cologne's still before the break. No, is it? No, it's not. Cologne's still after the break now, right? So I think that's
sure.
I think so. I think
I
the
got
break
my home
moved to
schedule, though.
being in June to July. So I believe that's right. But yeah, I think that will be nice. But in general, I think the fact that you have so many teams coming in that are in contention for titles, and you have like a pretty good opening like circuit to the start of the year is going to make it quite exciting. Because you have Kato starting, you have Blast, you have EPL, you have the major, you have a break, you have Clone. I think that the like start of the circuit will be quite fun to watch with the number of teams that are in contention, and just with the way the circuit's going to shape up at the start of the year.
Okay. I like that you brought up the Blast major point.
Yeah.
That was a really good one. That's I think everybody's gonna look forward to that. I think also the fact that it's in Paris, like, and we're gonna get a hopefully very like just everybody's gonna turn up for that. Like, I mean, I've said before, like, I think Western European audiences are just sorry everybody else, but they're just the best. Like, it's just you get this huge blend of people that are just fans of the game themselves because it's just so popular in Europe. Like, it's so crazy how much more popular CS is over there. But okay, is that anybody else have anything else before we start wrapping the whole thing up?
I'm optimistic about the state of the map pool because Anubis is better than Dust 2, and hopefully Valve will get the picture for everything else.
Not bad.
There you go.
True. Okay, let's wrap this up. So this has been the 40th episode of It's Server Time. It is coming to its close, its terminus, I suppose. It's been great. We've been running this show for over 2 years now. This was just kind of like an idea that really I knew I wanted to do a show. I liked all these guys that were on the show, and so honestly, we just committed to doing it. And I think a lot of the episodes, like, there's been a lot of really cool moments. I think some of the funny stuff that really stuck with me was just the fact that we got a couple players like before they really hit the big time on this, which was nice. Like, we got a couple, like we got JDC, we got Yakindar twice. I mean, we got Snappy at one point, actually, right? And we got Fang. I mean, we got more people than that. Obviously, we got a bunch of talent members that I can't thank enough for them showing up on the show. Thorin, Richard Lewis, Scrawny recently, Launders, like, blah. I mean, there's so many people, I can't name them all. We would just be here for too long, and I'd just be literally just reading a list at that point.
Yeah.
But mostly, I do want to just thank Mix, Note, and Pernogo for doing this and committing to this with me for as long as we have, because I think that we actually did make a mark on the CSGO space. I think that you could have safely said for periods of the show that it was like a top 5 CSGO podcast, like, which is kind of weird how there's kind of a lot of shows, but they're kind of like smaller. And I think we actually put something together that people were looking forward to. I know that there's been a bit of an outcry for like, why is it ending and everything like that, which I'll get to. But I think that we put something out there regularly that people were happy about and they were able to enjoy. I think the live component of it also is something that people have been thankful for when we have decided to do that. So thanks, I think, for suggesting that. I think that was Pernogo. I think you said you could just do it really easily, so you just did it. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your production efforts too.
Sure.
And Note and Mix, I always appreciate your guys' takes on different sides of the game, because we have different viewpoints, and yet it's all with the North American bias. That's how we keep things consistent on the show. So there was always that little spin for the show, but I think this was a really cool idea, and I really hope that whatever all of us move forward on, that we find success in that too. But I mean, if there's any other kind of closing thoughts you guys have for the show and what it's meant, feel free. The floor is all of yours.
Yeah, I mean for me I'd never done like a consistent podcast thing before, and I think it really helped kind of establish how to talk about ideas outside of like a written article format. That was something that was like writing articles and whatnot was very familiar to me, but I was less I guess less inclined, but also less like quite nervous to go on a video and talk about ideas and kind of just have that free flowing. And I think just over the last 2 years of doing this podcast, kind of going in and having like a general outline, but also kind of just being able to free flow ideas and talk about the game with people has been a lot of fun. I think it's been just honestly something to look forward to. Like after an event ends, we're like, oh, we're gonna do an episode after this, and we're gonna like talk about like with people who also watched all the event and really enjoy the game. It's just been a lot of fun having that as like a shared experience. Yeah, I think it's been a lot of it's just been really nice having this as a platform and being able to talk about it with you guys.
What do you got, Mix?
I appreciate. I was gonna say I appreciate the platform a lot. Appreciate you guys. Just being able to talk CS with you guys has been a lot of fun, especially to build up an audience. Kind of like a committed viewership type of thing was really nice. So yeah, just thank you guys for your time the past 2 years. It's been really nice.
Yeah, for me, it was, I'm echoing the sentiments of the past two answers. I would say, obviously, I started off just as a guy behind the scenes producing, occasionally would speak. People would be wondering, who's that guy? He's not Sam. What's happening? And then, obviously, eventually managed to carve out my own square here, which was interesting. And it was a nice opportunity to be maybe seen as a more legitimized analyst in the space, where previously like, most people just don't even know who I am. So before that, I was definitely less known, and now maybe people know that I have something to say, which is cool. Always nice when you get the opportunity to do that. And obviously, we got to, all three of us here that aren't Mauisnake got to see Mauisnake go from guy at DreamHacks to guy at Majors, and that was an interesting transformation. So we also got to know that, like, there's some element there where it's like, if people like what sometimes success changes people, and Mauisnake didn't change in that way. So he still had
until now when he kicks us off.
Then he cancels the show. But up until this point, he hadn't changed, and he had kept us around. So that was cool too.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I messaged Maui when he told the news, and I was like begging him to not end it. And he said, and then he blocked me.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually the first time I've contacted Nick since telling him of the decision. Actually, he is blocked on all my social media platforms. He has no way of contacting me following the conclusion of this episode.
There it is.
So. Okay, so I guess that leads us to our very last round of shoutouts. I'll do mine first because it's very shameless, and it's kind of like the reason I'm closing out the show is that what I'm looking to do for the future for this channel, for this YouTube channel, let's say, because people might be watching on Twitch, but for the YouTube channel is that I'm moving forward with an idea that I've been stirring with for a while, and I just kind of knew the limits of myself moving forward, which is that I'm going to just make basically a solo podcast show, just called the Mauisnake Show. You can look for it. First episode should be out as soon as next week or maybe even this weekend. And I'm just going to be interviewing different people from the space, mostly CSGO in the beginning, but I wanted to branch out to like other industries or other esports and other industries such that just kind of frees myself from that. And it's going to just be like more regular content, because at the end of the day, as great as it was to have like this ensemble cast every single time and trying to get a guest, I think we all experienced the difficulties of planning this and making sure that it was consistent. And so this is something where I know that more consistently I'll be able to connect with fans and also just different people in the space, because the only barrier is going to be my schedule and their schedule. And then and you can expect on that show that I'm going to have all these guys that are here being regular contributors, or at least like, whenever it feels like it's appropriate, I'm going to bring these guys on. So it's not like this is going to be the end of seeing myself with Mix, myself with Note, myself with Pronogo, but in this format of this 4-panel type of show, this is the final one. And once again, I think the final shout out for me is just thank you guys for coming with me on this journey.
There it is.
Of course.
Yeah, Note, what's your shout out, Note?
I I mean, to start, obviously, I want to shout out the show and you for even arranging this and kind of bringing everybody together to do this consistently. I think what some people might not know about the show is that every time that we would plan to do one, Mauisnake would also type out like a topic list of what we would be discussing. So even with his schedule, with his travel and everything, he would always like prep kind of what the general podcast format and flow would be like, and that takes like a lot of work on top of everything else. So I definitely want to say thanks for that and for keeping this such a like always trying to make time for it, even though your schedule got pretty busy especially this year. I think in general, yeah, like shout out to all three of you because it's been a lot of fun doing this over the last 2 years. Yeah, otherwise, I guess I think one thing that I will say is that this show's definitely helped me appreciate like the video medium of doing like talking about topics or talking about games or just like talking to players and interviewing them, and that's something that I want to explore more, and I don't think it's something I would have been comfortable with doing or as comfortable with doing before we started recording this podcast. So I want to definitely say thanks for that, and that's also something maybe to look out for me for next year where I might be doing something similar as well, where I might do just topic discussions or maybe some interviews with players who might not be in CS as well, because obviously HLTV will probably want some of those first.
All right, thank you. Mix, what's your shout out?
I don't think I can do a shout out on the last episode of It's Server Time and have it be anyone other than OC.
There it
That's what I'm doing
is.
the entire time. So yeah, fuck you guys, fuck the show.
Sure.
Completely reasonable.
Yeah.
OC for life. Yeah.
And Mantu over Zaiwu and MSL and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Natsu over Zaiwu. MSL is poggers.
Patented mixed moments is mixed moments. Yeah.
Another one
Okay.
be predicting Imperial to beat Vitality, which did not happen.
Unfortunate. Just unlucky, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get 'em next time.
Okay. Thank you, Mix. Pranogo, what is your final shout out?
Well, on Note's behalf, I'll shout out HLTV, and on Mauisnake's behalf, I'll shout out every TO that he's worked with this year, and on Mix's behalf, he already did his actual patented shout out, so I can't even steal that. But no, I'll say shout out to the fact that, like, despite that we are closing out the show and it's going to be the end, the viewers were always good. The interaction, like I've been a part of a bunch of shows. I've hosted a bunch of shows, and sometimes the chat is maybe piles in way more, right? And maybe that's just an aspect of the fact that maybe those shows are bigger, right? We think of like a lot of the other chats, but like the fans of this show, the chat, like very rare was there any bad apples. And I think that's probably because we marketed this show as this like show for enthusiasts, the show for people who care about the games, who want to know about. It's called It's Server Time. It's not like It's Drama Time or whatever. So I think that probably lended well to it. So yeah, conceptually and in terms of the topics that we talked about and the audience that we cultivated, I think all good stuff. So yeah, you can't really. It's weird to do a shout out knowing it's the last time, and actually the last one because oh no, that's not true because. Maybe Mauisnake has one final one for us. We'll see. But in general, it's like, oh yeah, this is the last time. It's shout out to the fact that it's the last time with you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that covers it. I think that's it. Getting a little more emotional than I expected, but thank you guys once again. Thank you to the audience who have tuned in. Thank you to all the guests over the history of It's Server Time. It's been 2 years. It's actually been 2 years and 3 months. Specifically since we've been starting this, so it's been excellent stuff. Thank you to all the patrons too. Your support has been very much so appreciated, and your questions on top of that, great added element to the end of all these shows. But yeah, hope to see you guys more in 2023. Hope you guys see much more of my co-hosts as well. Be sure to follow all of us on our social medias, as I'm sure that everybody has more in store. So you're going to want to keep in tune. You're going to stay on top of that. Thank you for the final time.